Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is my show. I'm glad that you could join me. Running a bit behind this morning, so I am going to go directly to my guest.
I'm glad that you could join me. Running a bit behind this morning, so I am going to go.
Andre, it's there's a reverb. But
Sorry, I apologize. There you go.
no, you're perfectly fine, man. How you doing? Okay this morning?
I'm grade 5. How are you, Jamal? How's everything on your side?
I'm alive. Everything is okay. I can't complain. I'm not going to complain. But just so the audience has a heads up on who you are, Andrei Telechenko is a Ukrainian whistleblower and former diplomat. He was very close with the former Ukrainian government, and he has effectively outed all sorts of stuff that I would imagine they don't want outed. Andre, I have to get your take on the peace negotiations, just overall, before we step into the conversation.
Thank God they're happening. And I think everybody has to understand it's not just the peace negotiations that are happening. This is the first step of negotiations between the United States and the Russian Federation. This is what the talks are happening right now. The main talks are about the relationship between Russia and the United States. That is the main topic for those two countries, the two superpowers that are discussing what is the agenda for today, the political agenda, the diplomatic agenda, the economical agenda, because those talks were blocked by the Biden administration for all these years. And plus, they did not allow in Trump's first term the deep state to have a communication of such sort with the Russian Federation. Yeah, there were meetings with Putin, but remember those Russia hoax stories, everybody who was trying to work with Russia or get a diplomatic relationship back on track with Russia, they were politically destroyed, sanctioned, put to prison, etc., on different lies. And so this is what we're seeing today: a restoration of relationship between those two superpowers, two large nuclear nations. And one of those topics is peace negotiations on Ukraine. So that is one of the topics they're talking about, and everybody has to understand this is the big picture, not just Ukraine. And they're talking about Ukraine, and everybody's meeting only about Ukraine and Zelensky, and everybody thinking about Zelensky. No, nobody's thinking about Zelensky in those peace negotiations. I think there's the last person they're thinking about is Zelensky. They're thinking about how to get things done and not to lead to World War III, which I am glad that this is happening. I applaud those two nations, those two leaders of countries, Putin, Trump, that they got on the phone together, and hopefully they're going to meet soon and discuss this whole thing face to face and in person, and then we can get things done.
No, there we are. The mic was the mute button just wouldn't come off. I'm sorry. No, I agree with you, man. You have my full agreement on this. I don't like the fact that we're at odds. I don't like the fact that all of these people are being killed. From my point of view, it's a catastrophe. I want the catastrophe to end and be over with. What do you take? Well, how do you respond to people screaming now who are coming out of the West? It is fascinating to me that, like, if people talk about war, usually they talk about it as a negative, saying, okay, this is bad. This is not something we want to do. That's not the way they act, though, when it's in real terms. And you get a president saying, I'm going to end it. And they're like, oh, my God, I can't believe he's trying to end the war. It's like, what do you mean? Oh, my God, he's trying to end it. That's a good thing. And they are screaming, oh, my God, this is betrayal. What do you say to those people who say, well, this is a betrayal for Donald Trump to end the war?
They're evil and hypocrites. And I think that's what they are. They're trying to. They have an agenda. These people. They're warmongers. They're being owned. These people are not sovereign. These politicians are not sovereign. We see all these European leaders, American senators and congressmen, the Democratic Party screaming their heads off that, oh, how this is happening. They are the ones who have their blood on their hands for this war. They're the ones who led my country into this war by getting Zelensky involved and Zelensky getting them involved into this, and basically saying we're going to topple the government in Russia, which they failed to, thank God, because then we would have a total world destruction. And this is what we have today. These people are showing their face. I think this is good. We're going to see who is who now. Who is for peace and who is good, or at least going to that path, or who is the bad politician? Look at those Lindsey Graham, and look at those Ambassador McFall, all these. How could this is happening? You are warmongers. You're evil. You brought this war. You didn't stop it. You wanted this war to end on the so-called Ukrainian terms. That's impossible. That's illogical. You can an ant cannot give terms to an elephant. This is this is what we are, especially if it's losing. Especially Ukraine is losing. They cannot get the terms to Russia Federation. That even if the country is losing, that's what it is. Ukraine lost when the coup happened in 2014. That's when the real war started with the Donbass and the director of CIA Brennan giving an order to shell Donbass. I was in that meeting. I remember when it happened. I remember when Turchino took that order and started the anti-terrorist operation in Donbass, shelling his own people with mortars and aircrafts. This is what Ukraine did. And then this war in 2022 emerged when Ukraine didn't sign those peace deals, when Ukraine had a chance to keep its own full territory with Donbass and stop the war. It didn't. Poroshenko didn't. He lied. The same with Merkel and Hollande. They came out and they said, oh, yes, we signed those Minsk agreements. We didn't want peace with Russia. We just want to arm the Ukrainian army so it's going to fight Russia. This is what they are. They came out and spoke about with openly. They didn't basically they lied to us. So then we had this Istanbul, and Zelensky also could have had the Minsk agreements. He was laughing at this. He got voted in by the people to bring peace, but he was laughing. But and now he's still laughing. He thinks he has the deep state behind him. He doesn't. He's going to be destroyed by the people who made him, by the United States. He was made by the United States. He's going to be destroyed by the United States. And thank God, the faster they do it, the happier the Ukrainians will be, because they're being thrown like dogs to the front lines. I dare for everybody who understands to come and see what's really happening in Ukraine, not the picture that the Zelensky's showing them, but the real picture, and talk to the real people, the men that are hiding in their houses for 2 years. 2 years, some men are not coming out of their homes. 2 years, they're like in prison, because if they come out, they're going to be thrown like dogs to the front lines and die there. This is what Ukraine is: a dictatorship, a total destruction, and their country, Zelensky lost its country. It had a chance to have peace. It didn't. And now we see who those people are, and thank God.
Right there. I'm glad you mentioned that, because Trump said this, and people flipped out. And I'm saying people in Europe, and what I mean by that is political people, because he pointed out, and he didn't say exactly. I'm just going to play it. And basically, what they're accusing him of saying is that Zelensky started the war. He didn't exactly say that. But his point, I think, is right. That, look, man, you had the opportunity to put this to bed. You didn't put this to bed, and you're complaining about the fact that I am. I think his point is correct. And you added some background to that in regards to, well, these guys blew off the Minsk agreements. They blew off the Istanbul agreements. They had no interest in making any kind of peace.
I think I have the power to end this war, and I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I think I have.
So, look, I think his point is basically, dude, you could have fulfilled the Minsk agreements. You didn't do it. You were elected to fulfill the Minsk agreements. You didn't do it. When it started, there were the Istanbul agreements. You blew those off after coming to a framework of agreement. And now you're complaining about me trying to end it. Like, what the hell? That's his point. And you added clarity to what was going on before, saying effectively, this was a civil war. West Ukraine was bombing Eastern Ukraine. They blew off elections. They got rid of Eastern Ukraine political parties. They got rid of opposition media, meaning this notion that this is just a dictatorship and there was a revolution of dignity and Russia just invaded because was nonsense. There were all sorts of pathways where this could have been averted or never started in and of itself. What is your take on him saying that? Like this thing of all of you people in Europe and Zelensky is complaining about not being at the table when you had 3 years to be at the table and didn't do anything about it.
You had 10 years to be at the table, and I think Trump needs to update that. 10 years to be at the table and didn't do anything. And then you had 3 years with this active war and didn't do Nothing. More than 1 million Ukrainians are dead. I think Trump also needs to check in those numbers. The difference, even if you count how the bodies are being exchanged, the dead bodies of soldiers. The last exchange has happened a week ago. 575 Ukrainian soldiers compared to 75 Russian soldiers, dead body exchange. That is the number difference between the deaths on the battlefield compared to Russia and Ukraine. So you can count on those also. That's one thing. And both sides are being killed dramatically and massively. Problem is, the United States, the deep state, had a coup in Ukraine funded by the USAID, NED, and all those CIA-funded organizations. That was there on Maidan. I saw the money flow. There was cash coming in from the United States government to the Maidan, to the trade union building where the main office of the opposition was at that time. Stacks of cash to pay for the stage, to pay for the buses for the people, to pay for the heat, to pay for everything. It was on life support, that whole process. It was not by the people. The people, maybe gave something, but that was not enough. It was all being supported by the West. That has to be understood. That has to be looked into. That's one. Then the Civil War started with the support of the United States. At the same time, what I said, I was there in the meeting where the director CIA gave that order. Aaron Matic had a great article last year on Ukraine being basically cut down by the United States for 10 years. And I gave all the insights on that. I was in that meeting when Brennan gave that order to Shell because those people weren't Russian. He hated them. That's what he did. That's why the war started in Ukraine. And more than 15,000 Ukrainians in the East died because of the Ukrainian army shelling them. That's second part. Third part, we have today that this could have been ended for years and years. No, nobody wanted to end this because, first of all, they had the agenda from the West within the first 3 months to topple the government in Russia, which they failed dramatically because they had nothing. Russia didn't topple. It got stronger and has no more support in the world. And their economy is actually much stronger than the European economy. But that's what their agenda was. It didn't go through. They were starting to make money on this. That was what Zelensky signed up for. That's what the West signed up for. They were giving all these weapons to Ukraine, all these old weapons. They were writing all those off from their warehouses. The Taliban has better weapons than the Ukrainian army got because they was done by the United States. What the Ukrainian army got was all old equipment, and they were basically making money on this. And half of that equipment was being sold off to drug cartels, to terrorists around the globe by the Ukrainian government and by the West. So this is what was happening in Ukraine. Everybody was making money. Zelensky was making money on this. All his money was going through and is still going through the United Arab Emirates. That's where the laundering machine is today for the Zelensky regime. So I think Elon Musk should look into that. Where is that money going to? Where's the U.S. taxpayer money going? Through the United Arab Emirates. That's where they should look into it. And so this is what it is today. A money laundering scheme. Zelensky doesn't care about his people. Zelensky doesn't care about the land. If he cared about it, he would stop this war. Now he has a lot of Ukraine territory, more than 35% of Ukraine territory lost and losing every day. The Russian army is advancing pretty fast in each of those front lines at 1,200 kilometer front line zone, and they're moving in everywhere in that front line zone. And the Ukrainian army being totally destroyed because they don't want to fight. All those men who were sent to the front lines and thrown in like dogs or prisoners there, they don't want to fight because they understand they're going to die. They have no ability to do that. The army that was prepared to fight for the last 10 years got destroyed within a year and a half by the Russian army. So Ukraine has nothing to fight with. Zelensky has no country left, but he's still holding on to his seat because he's a dictator who's making money on this war together with his rivals or together with his allies in the West, in Europe, London, France, Germany, the Baltics. They're making money on this. So is Lindsey Graham making money on this. Well, ask Lindsey Graham how much money did he get from Pinchuk and Zelensky for coming in, supporting him at the Munich Peace Conference, Security Conference. More than $500,000. That's the price for Lindsey Graham's words. And those are the same people who are trying to get Ukraine into war again. So this is Trump is doing everything right. I think he needs to look into the numbers more in depth, how much deaths there are on the Ukrainian side, looking in depth how much what Ukraine can give to the United States, because we see that Ukraine cannot give anything to the United States back because everything is stolen. And he should look into who really is behind this war and name those people like Lindsey Graham and everybody else who are trying to continue to fight this war with Russia and bring everybody to World War III.
there are two things that I want to hit. One is Trump's speech here, because he points into this notion of a dictatorship. And people are like, oh my God, I can't believe they're calling Zelensky a dictator. Again, the man has gotten rid of elections. He is, his last election was in 2024. He is well beyond his presidential man.
2019, his last election was.
Thank you. So he was supposed to have an election in 2024. He blew that off. He has now declared martial law and is saying, well, the Russians want me to have an election, so that is enough of a reason for me not to have an election. Also, again, eliminating political parties, eliminating media opposition to you are not things that a democracy do. Those are things that a dictator do. So when Trump points this out, and I want to get your take on it.
He refuses to have elections, is low in the real Ukrainian polls. I mean, how can you be high with every city is being demolished? It's hard to be high. Somebody said, oh no, his polls are good. Give me a break. Every city is being demolished. They look like a demolition site, every single one of them. And the only thing he was really good at was playing Joe Biden like a fiddle. He played him like a fiddle. That's an expression we use, Yasser, to say that he's pretty easy, A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast because that war is going in the wrong direction. In the meantime, we're successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something I'll admit that only Trump is going to be able to do in the Trump administration. We're going to be able to do it. I think Putin even admitted that. He refuses to have elections, is low in the real Ukrainian.
How, if elections were held today in Ukraine, I mean, at one point Trump said Zelensky had 4% approval rating, I believe. I don't believe it's that low. Fair enough. I mean, he's clearly mocking him. You say it is? Okay, right here. Here's the piece where he points out, he says, yeah, the guy has 4% in the race.
Where we haven't had elections in Ukraine, where we have more.
We're hearing that Russia wants to force Ukraine to hold new elections in order to sign any kind of a peace deal. Is that something that U.S. would ever support?
Well, we have a situation where we haven't had elections in Ukraine, where we have martial law, essentially martial law in Ukraine, where the leader in Ukraine, I mean, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4% approval rating, and where a country has been blown to smithereens. You got most of the cities are laying on their sides. The buildings are collapsed. It looks like a massive demolition site. The whole, I mean, so many of the cities. I mean, they haven't done it in Kiev because I guess too many rockets in there. They've done it 20%, but they haven't done it 100%. If they wanted to do it 100%, it would probably happen very quickly. But you have cities that are absolutely decimated. And yeah, I would say that, you know, when they want a seat at the table, you could say the people have to, wouldn't the people have?
He is obviously right that the country needs elections. Like the last Gallup poll that was taken pointed out that the overwhelming majority of the country wants to end the war, even if that means territorial losses. They were like, just make the war stop. Zelensky has been described by even Western media as messianic, as delusional, as a hindrance to getting the war to stop. He is putting into the Constitution, or has put into the Constitution, that Ukraine cannot negotiate. But he is interpreting it as he himself can negotiate, something that clearly Trump and Russia do not want him to be a part of. Russia is effectively saying, you're not even the leader of the country, so you can't even sign the agreement without an election to verify that the public chooses you. Trump seems to know this. If elections were held today, would Zelensky win? I know, and you preempted by effectively saying, yes, he's that bad, or he's that lowly regarded in Ukraine.
Last year, I think even on your show, we spoke on how Zelensky's rating was. And I said last year was south 7%. Nobody believed me at that time. Now today, the president of the United States says 4%. I think it is, and it's maybe lower. You put a broom on this election, an election ballot against Zelensky, the broom is going to win. That's how bad it is. I'm serious. he has the support of propaganda. He has the support of some radicals, but even they understand that it's all done. He's there. He is holding on to his seat because he understands as soon as he loses, or as soon as peace comes to Ukraine, he's going to die politically or physically by his owners and the globalists, or the radicals in Ukraine are going to hang him because for what he did. He totally is an incompetent president. He is an illegal president by the terms, and Russia is right because they say, look, if we bring him to the table, first of all, he made a law by the National Security Council of Ukraine, and he signed that into law himself that he cannot negotiate. He put it into a law that he cannot negotiate with Putin and Russia. So he himself blocked himself from doing this on purpose. And that's one thing. Second of all, if he does come to the table at one point and signs any documents, what legitimacy would he have to say that some people would come into Ukraine and say he is not legitimate to sign those documents? We're going to continue this war. So this is what we're talking about. Having elections. First of all, elections with who? There's no opposition. The problem is that in Ukraine, there is no opposition in Ukraine. It was all killed, or people had to flee. I had to flee from Ukraine, not because of the war with Russia, but because of the Kiev regime who went after me. They wanted to kill me. They were on TV talking about how they're going to shoot me down. 3 of my friends got shot because of all this. Because they were just talking about peace, not because of Russia or the United States. They were talking about peace negotiations. I was put on the Mirotvorets kill list. I was put under sanctions by the Zelensky regime, which Ukrainian citizens they cannot sanction me, but they did because they hate people like me. So there's no opposition. Anybody who was in Ukraine is fully coordinated, or some people even who fled, like Arestovich. He's fully coordinated by the deep state. Arestovich is owned by Novichkin. Novichkin is the puppet of Nuland. Klitschko is he owns all the prostitution business in Kiev. He's also owned by the West, and he's a German citizen, so he cannot become a legitimate president or a neutral president. Poroshenko is a puppet of the West. Same thing with Zaluzhny. Anybody, Timoshenko, anybody who comes out within this political agenda of Ukraine, they're not legitimately neutral, or not the people who Ukrainians want to stop this war. They're going to continue the agenda of the deep state, which is to undermine Trump, because they're owned by the deep state. Ukraine was so penetrated by people like Nuland, Obama's, Clinton's, Soros, for all these years, that everybody in Ukraine right now who's in politics, who's standing on their 2 feet, they are an enemy of Trump because they're going to work against him and try to undermine him, the same as Zelensky doing it. Maybe they're going to be more calmer than him, or not as open as him, but they're going to try to undermine President Trump also, and the Russia peace negotiations, what they're happening, even if there's going to be elections. But the Ukraine needs elections. Ukraine needs elections, and if the United States and Russia agree on and upon that there's going to be opposition involved, Ukraine has a chance of coming out of this ditch, which it is in. It's a total dictatorship. First of all the borders are blocked. Nobody can leave. People who are leaving the country have to pay $15,000 bribes to leave Ukraine. That is the price, from $15,000 to $25,000. Even then, they get shot or captured on the border because some of those documents are not legit. So this is what they're facing today. A lot of people are standing in their homes because they're afraid to come out on the street because they're going to get caught or sent to the front lines. Anybody who speaks out against Zelensky, it goes to the Security Service of Ukraine jail. They get politically. There's more than 15,000 politically motivated cases in Ukraine by the numbers of the United Nations. This is the official agenda of the United Nations, signed off as of last year. 15,000 politically motivated cases in Ukraine. That's a dictatorship we're talking about, financed by the United States government, the former administration. Thank God this one's going to stop this. Gonzalo Lira, a U.S. citizen, got killed in Ukraine prison by the Security Service of Ukraine. Everybody was quiet about it. They were exchanging some woman who was a drug addict from Russia. Yes, everybody has to be saved. Even drug addicts, they have a chance. But you had a journalist who was captured by the Kiev regime just for speaking out the truth, and he was killed in that prison. And nobody spoke about that. And today, thank God, Elon Musk and this administration is talking about these crimes of the Zelensky regime, and they have to pay the price. Zelensky has to pay the price. I think he has to leave, flee Ukraine, leave. That's what the Trump administration has to put it up to. This is not a legitimate president. There's a parliament of Ukraine. Ukraine is a parliamentary presidential republic. The parliament of Ukraine has the power now to sign any peace agreements, and that's what it has to come down to.
One of the main issues in elections that will be have, or that Ukraine will have, is that opposition parties to the coup governments have been eliminated. So, the people who have been on the show have pointed out that you would only get people like Zelensky. Arestowitz doesn't have the political power, even though he seems to have taken a different political tact. But that anybody that would even be able to run in an election in Ukraine is effectively part of this kind of Western pro-war clique, because all of the other opposition groups to that pro-war clique, to the regime change, the Banderites or the Banderas, as they're called, have been eliminated.
Neo-Nazis. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, yes, let's have elections. Oh, by the way, the only people that can come are neo-Nazis. It's that part, right? So will elections make a difference in regards to Ukraine if all of the people who are eligible for elections are lunatics?
That's what I'm talking about. Not only lunatics, they are working with the deep state of the globalists. They're
Right.
owned by them, the same as Zelensky is. And we have to take into the fact with these elections, there's more than 1.3 million Ukrainians who fled to Russia. What a coincidence, or what a shock to everybody that Russia's waged war in Ukraine and 1.3 Ukrainians fled to Russia, not from eastern Ukraine, but from all over Ukraine.
Yeah.
And will they have a possibility to vote on this election? Probably not.
And by the way,
Same thing-
just to back up your point real quick, the majority of Ukraine voted for Zelensky under the idea that he was going to end the war, he was going to implement Minsk, he was going to end, meaning this is not what the country wanted. Like, this is more for the reason why I call this a catastrophe. The country literally voted to not have a war, to normalize relations, to put this to bed. And yet, here's hundreds of thousands of people dead.
Yes, 73% of Ukrainians voted for Zelensky because he said he will make a peace deal, even with the devil himself. That was his quote. He said that he will do the Minsk agreements, he will sign them, he will implement them, he will have Donbass back into Ukraine peacefully, we will have a peaceful life. He spoke in Russian. He said, I have no problem with Russian-speaking Ukrainians whatsoever. I have no problem with religion whatsoever, even though he's an atheist. He's a Jewish, but he doesn't even go to he's an atheist. He doesn't go to church. So this guy, basically, some character, some clown maybe, but he was promising things for Ukraine. He was the only hope by that time for Ukraine, because Poroshenko was a dictator himself. He was getting Ukraine into this continuing war with Donbass, and people wanted to change. But no, he sold off to the Brits and to the MI6, the globalists, in 2019. And that's what we are today. That's why he's so, he thinks he's so powerful that he can come up against Trump and say that he will go and that he will withstand the president of the United States and fight this war with Russia and continue to fight this war with Russia successfully. Zelensky is successful because the United States and the West gave so many weapons. He had old weapons, but so many weapons into Ukraine that they could withstand Russia for some time. Russia didn't have an agenda to destroy Ukraine like Israel destroyed Gaza, totally complete destruction. No, they were doing things in a more moderate way. Where there's a war zone, but they were not destroying big cities like Trump said himself. So this gave Zelensky a momentum to go forward. This gave, and plus Putin promised that he's not going to kill Zelensky at the beginning of the war. He's not going to go after him because he thought at one point maybe Zelensky will have a mind of a statesman, sign a peace deal, and not continue this war. But no, Zelensky didn't, and he continued this war. And this elections today, and you're right, and that's what I'm talking about. There's an election without a possibility of electing the person who might be good for Ukraine, who can be a neutral, sovereign candidate, a statesman. Really, we're trying to make peace within Ukraine, be good with the West, and be good with Russia.
Who would
There's
that be?
nobody like that. There's nobody right now.
That
That is the problem. Anybody who is there, they're not in Ukraine. They're under sanctions, or they're under criminal prosecutions within by the Kiev regime. And those people cannot go or don't have the physical possibility to go for these elections. And that is the big question. What the West needs to understand and make a deal with Russia. And these elections not have to be pushed only by the West. They have to be coordinated together within this peace negotiations with Russia on how to make these elections happen. If these elections are going to go through, there has to be opposition, and thus the opposition will have security possibilities to come to Ukraine and not get killed and go for these elections and maybe win. Or will there maybe needs to be a neutral government who's going to come to power for some time, get things arranged, sign peace deals and arrangements, and then within some time frame when we're going to have everything back on track, have elections and have a government that will going to represent everybody and all the people without any neo-Nazis, globalist lunatics running around Kiev and shooting people, or the CIA undermining any possibility of having peace in Ukraine. That's why Trump needs to give an order to the U.S. intelligence to get out of Ukraine, leave only the diplomatic corps, change the embassy, filter it, have new people there who are going to be loyal to the new administration, and get all the U.S. intel groups out of Ukraine. And that's maybe will bring some sense to what's going to happen on the ground in Kiev.
Oh,
Anything else is going to undermine these peace negotiations and any elections.
That would be big. You said Zelensky would die politically or physically. Oh, you also pointed out that anybody who's pushing for peace in this may get killed if they were in Ukraine trying to do so. Who would do that? Who are the killers in this situation? Are these the Banderites? Are these, like you said, deep CIA spooks working for the CIA? Who's the expectation? Because it's also been said about Zelensky, if Zelensky took a tack towards peace, if he signed any agreement to end the war, that his life would be forfeit. Who are the people? Who are the
people who are killing anybody who speaks out about peace in Ukraine is the government, the Secret Service of Ukraine. Those are the people who went after me. Those are the people who killed my friends. And just political experts. They were not businessmen. They were not oligarchs. They were nobody. They were just political experts going on TV and talking about peace, just like me. And they got shot by the security service of Ukraine, by its own government. That's one thing. For Zelensky, I think the people themselves are gonna go after him, and he knows that. He understands that. Not just because he's gonna sign peace deals, but because because what he did to the country.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to try to flee the country because that's what his only chance is. That's why he's holding on to power so much, because he understands his days are numbered. And as long as he continues this war, as long as there's no peace on the agenda, the longer he stays in power with his so-called Yermak and all those neo-Nazi elites, he is being coordinated and controlled by the British intelligence and the U.S. intelligence. So and coordinated within the deep state. So I think anything he does that is not on their agenda, they are the ones who might kill him also, because his family is being his wife is being bodyguarded by foreigners, not by the Ukrainian government secret service, but by foreign secret service officials. So that's what it is today. He is also a hostage in this. I'm not trying. He's not good at this. He can do things, and he can liberate himself by making a deal with the president of the United States and with Russia, and he would have saved his life. But he doesn't want to. Also, he doesn't want to do this because he understands he is done. If he does this, he'll have to run for his life his whole lifespan, because his money is not going to save him. He's a billionaire now. He's a multi-billionaire. He probably is much more richer than Trump. That's why he's also acting this way. He's saying, "Oh, I'm much more powerful than the president of the United States because I have more money than him." But his money is all in hiding. President Trump, everybody knows where his money is, and everybody sees his money. It's all legit. But Zelensky's money is all made on blood, Ukrainian and Russian blood.
I want to end it on this: rare earth minerals. I am fascinated by the story that is coming out of Bloomberg. So Bloomberg is saying rare earths in Ukraine. No, only scorched earth. Now, what the article is referencing is this idea that Donald Trump is going under this belief that he can get $500 billion out of rare earth minerals from Ukraine. And what Bloomberg points out is that was all a hoax. That doesn't exist. that Zelensky realized that he needed to pique Trump's interests and went with this idea that, hey, we have $500 billion rare earths that we can give to you if you give us security guarantees and you back my victory plan. And Trump is like, hey, that sounds great. I can sell this. I can get this money back. This is awesome. Not realizing that this was something that was just made up. Ukraine may have rare earth minerals, but not anywhere to the degree of $500 billion, talking about $500 billion. They made it up. Zelensky lied. He just lied. I'm amazed by that. I'm not shocked by it. It's just amazing to me that
this plan was being set up before even the inauguration or even before the election, starting summer of last year.
No, please explain. Go into it. I'm just fascinated by it.
Like, this plan was being set up. This lie was being set up as of summer of last year to, if Trump wins the elections, to try to sell off to him as a businessman that Ukraine has something to sell off to, or to has something to be sold to on the situation, even though everything's already bought by BlackRock. Whether Ukraine's grain, Ukraine's earth is being bought by BlackRock and it's owned by BlackRock. That's the reality today. What is not controlled by Russia? Ukraine does have earth minerals and it has a lot of stuff that is in the ground. First of all, it has it, but it's not developed. To develop it, you have to take up to 15 years to develop those earth minerals, because a lot of them are located under cities where you have to remanage and regroup the people who are living there and start developing that area. A lot of those earth minerals are in eastern Ukraine, maybe not in the amount of 500 billion, but there are there. That's first of all. Second of all, but Zelensky notched it up a bit and lied, as he said, and that's true. He just made a plan to get Trump's attention. He thought if he could sell this idea to Trump, Trump will continue his war, and Zelensky will pay off to Trump, not that money that was already paid to Ukraine, but the new money that is going to come into Ukraine to Trump with the earth minerals that there are in Ukraine. It's not in that big amount, but he could try to at least pay something off to the new administration. That was his idea. But Trump put it in a way that, oh no, I'm not going to get involved in this war. I want to make peace with Russia. I don't want World War III. Thank God. This is why everybody supported President Trump and in the Western world. And he said, we're going to take that money and we're going to pay off our loans that were given to Ukraine, that's understandable for the American people. America is $36 trillion of debt. It needs that money. Any dollar, any cent is on the payroll today. So $500 billion would be good for you back to the United States, which should pay to Ukraine with some surplus. So this is what Trump said. I want to get my money back from Ukraine. I don't care who pays it off, Russia, Ukraine, Zelensky, Zelensky, whatever, Teloshenko. I just want my money back. We're going to get out of Ukraine. We're going to save our face for the American public. This war is going to be over. We're going to save lives. And that is the great thing. But the problem is Trump was also undermining. That's what we were talking about. Get those U.S. intel groups out of Ukraine, U.S. intelligence service out of Ukraine. There's more than 16 agencies on Ukrainian soil right now from the United States. And the embassy, they're lying to the Trump administration. Get them out, clean the house, and they're going to give you the right numbers, which is happening in Ukraine. Ukraine doesn't have that amount of earth minerals. It has that amount, maybe up to $10 billion. That's what we had in the government, our prognosis when I was working in the cabinet of ministers. $10 billion, not more, that we can get right now. If you develop for 10, 15 years, you can get maybe another $15 billion or $20 billion in that amount, but that's have to take another 10 to 15 years. That is the real numbers. So Trump needs to get his team together in Ukraine, clean house in Ukraine, get loyal people on the ground for the embassy, get the intel groups out of there, which are undermining this whole thing, because they were behind this peace plan, earth mineral plan for Zelensky. They're the ones who made it up for him, and it sold it off to Trump and said Ukraine has this. They lied. The people who have to tell the truth to the president, who have to back him up, the U.S. Intel Service, they lied to the president of the United States. So the same thing, that's why he needs to make things right and get them out of Ukraine, clean house in the U.S. Embassy in Kiev, and start talking real business to Zelensky, get Zelensky out of Ukraine also, because he's a dictator, and he has to pay the price, Zelensky, for killing Gonzalo Lira and more than other tens of thousands of Ukrainians who got shot because they wanted peace in Ukraine.
Andre, man, I always appreciate you. And look, man, I think you're absolutely right. Um, it's just super weird to me that everybody's against war up until the point somebody tries to end it, and then they freak out. Andrei Telizhenko, he is Ukrainian whistleblower and former diplomat. Thank you, my man. I appreciate it. You be safe.
Thank you, Jamal. Be safe. God bless to you, and God bless to all your viewers.
Be safe. And yeah, he's right. I think he's right. Full-throated. I think he's right. It's amazing to me that the moment that people come out and say, okay, we want peace, we've been having war, it's time for peace, and they flip out, meaning you should hear the screaming that is coming out of US media these days because Donald Trump is trying to end the war. And yeah, he's doubled down, punching Zelensky. And as I was pointing out in some of the clips, I want to hit on something, though, that I'm astonished by. When Donald Trump came out and said the following, it was interpreted as Donald Trump saying that Zelensky or that Ukraine started the war, that Russia didn't go into Ukraine, that Ukraine somehow went into Russia. And the media ran with it and was like, oh my God, he is saying that Winston Churchill, the Ukrainian version, started the war. This is outrageous. And you could see it on all of these different channels coming out of places like CNN or these supposedly Democratic or even left-wing channels. This is what they're using to base this on. And any interpretation of what he's saying here is correct.
I think I have the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
All right. That is what he said. He didn't say that Zelensky went into Russia. He didn't say that Ukraine army went into Russia. He didn't say any of that. He said, you have been there for 3 years. You had the opportunity to end it. You should have never started it. All right. This is Putin back, I believe, in 2021. And I want you to hear what Putin says here because it's pertinent to the conversation we are having right now. I believe this is in 2021. But listen to what Putin says. And he's talking specifically about the Minsk agreements. You can read the bottom to hear what he's saying. In fact, I'll read it for clarity. Our position with Zelensky are different, but my position is very simple to understand. We want the Minsk agreements to be fulfilled in them. Go and read them and see what it says. It says Ukraine may begin to assert its control over the disputed territory the day after the elections are held. So Putin's position is, we want the Minsk agreements that were signed by Europe, that we signed, several members of the Security Council, I believe 3. We want them fulfilled. That's what we want. That's our ask. And that's our ask because that was what we agreed upon, meaning this was agreement by European powers, by Russia, by Ukraine to end the conflict. Angela Merkel, Hollande, comes out and said we never intended to fulfill the Minsk agreements. An agreement that was intended to end the war was specifically used to arm Ukraine to the hilt in order to prepare them for the war that it was supposed to end. In 2014, the government of Ukraine, democratically elected Yanukovych, was overthrown, meaning the legitimate government was gone. Everything after there were coup governments. They went after the Russian language. They went after opposition parties from the East. They went after opposition media. They went after it all. So this idea that, well, Trump is wrong in pointing that out. Trump is completely right. The Minsk agreements would have ended any conflict from taking place. None of these groups in Europe backed it. The US blew it off, didn't care about it at all. And because the main people who backed the agreement, in theory, didn't care about it, in fact, neither did Ukraine. From Ukraine's point of view, we are being rearmed. We are getting a massive military. So US doesn't care about it. Europe doesn't care about it. We don't care about it. All the while, Russia's pointing out, dude, you're blowing off the agreement. You're ignoring the agreement. Okay, what was this agreement supposed to stop? It was supposed to stop a war. What happened? A war. It's not shocking. It's not insane. And not just not shocking, not insane. Trump's point of it should have never started is completely right. Trump's point that, look, you should have engaged those negotiations earnestly. You should have been an honest actor in those negotiations. You should have fulfilled those agreements. And even when you get to the Istanbul agreements, the first month that the war starts, you get Zelensky coming up with a framework, working with the Russians, of agreement, the Istanbul agreements. Those get blown off because Boris Johnson lands in the country, says you're not going to get security guarantees from us. And so we need you to keep fighting. We'll give you all the money. We'll give you all the weapons that you want. We will back you with economic sanctions. We will do it all. But you're going to go out and fight. Zelensky said, okay. And immediately blew off the Istanbul negotiations. Negotiations, by the way, they would have ended the conflict. It would have ended the war. And nearly 1 million people wouldn't be dead. Hundreds of thousands of dead Ukrainians would be here today. It would be alive. So for all of this screaming that is taking place in headlines today, oh my God, this is a betrayal. Oh my God, I can't believe Donald Trump says that the war would have never started. Oh my God, I can't believe Donald Trump is blaming Zelensky. All of you need to shut the F up. You're wrong. Either you don't know what you are talking about or you're lying, or you take issue with the fact that Trump is the person who's trying to end it. You are wrong. He is right. None of this should have started. Putin wasn't, they are getting high on their own supply. They are doing their own drugs. This idea that Putin was threatening Europe is nonsense. The reason that Nord Stream existed, because they knew that there was no threat from Russia in this real terms. By the same token, if you're going after one of their sacred ponies, Ukraine being one, meaning you're trying to put your hands on, you're overthrowing the democratically elected will of that country. You're blowing off elections. You're criminalizing the Russian language or going after the Russian language. And you are killing ethnic Russian Ukrainians in a war that was initiated when you overthrew the government of Ukraine, or as a result of you overthrowing the government of Ukraine. Yeah, they're going to take issue. Just like we would take issue if Russia was trying to overthrow the government of Mexico, put in military personnel with all of these threats being leveled at the U.S. We would take severe issue with that in the same way we took issue with the Cuba situation, where we had the blockade where the Soviets were putting missiles into Cuba. Kennedy said, "Net, stop, no." And we were in the world for U.S. national security interests. How are they so deluded and so missing the boat when the situation reverses and it's Russia in the crosshairs? And where are the honest actors that looks at this and point out, okay, you all are lying. You are making this shit up. You are going along with your own propaganda, running with your own propaganda, full steam ahead. Reality be damned. What Trump said there was true. That's the only point I'm trying to make. Whatever his other faults, what he said there was true. There are no lies detected. It lines directly with reality that this never needed to happen. It never needed to take place. Putin's wants weren't all of Europe. Putin's wants weren't even Ukraine. Putin's want was, you have started a civil war. And it's not even shocking or difficult to understand. In 2014, we overthrew the Ukrainian government. We knocked over Yanukovych's government. We didn't like the fact that Yanukovych wasn't signing on to a deal with Europe. So we got rid of Yanukovych. You can listen to Victoria Nuland, Jeffrey Pyatt, having the conversation about who was going to take over after they overthrew that government, which took place later that month. With the people, by the way, who they chose and decided. We overthrew that government. All right. We used Nazis as a tip of the spear to do so. Ethnic Russian Ukrainians in the East said, this is outrageous. We're not accepting this. That is not the legitimate government. We're not going to accept it. Western Ukraine goes on a killing spree, killing up to 14,000 ethnic Russian Ukrainians. And again, goes after language, goes after political parties, all of it. Russia gets involved. William Burns, in his memo, Net Means Net, pointed out, We are going to provoke a civil war if we continue to push NATO membership. And it is going to be a war that Russia does not want to get involved in, but will have to get involved in, whether they want to or not. Burns, it's not a psychic. Burns can look at the political realities on the ground and say Russia's not messing around. This is on the border. This is going through Ukraine. Ukraine has been the gateway for attacks on Russia going all the way back to Napoleon, if not before. They are dodgy about their borders, especially in wars where in the First and Second World War by Europe, you get, 30 million Russians dead, maybe more, or let's say Soviets, Russians, in those two wars. So they're not shocked to be dodgy about their borders. The issue, more to the point, is that you overthrew a government, you created all sorts of chaos, you provoked a war that they got involved in. Trump's point is it never needed to take place. Trump's point is right. Trump's point is right. I want to bring my man in. We are joined with the man of the hour, Garland Nixon. Garland Nixon is a political analyst. He also runs his own YouTube channel. Definitely check him out. Garland, my man, how you doing this morning? You doing okay? We may be having audio issues. I can't hear you. I can't hear you, Garland. Try one more.
There we go.
There you are.
Yeah,
now
so
I can hear you.
I looked down and I saw the little red mute stop. Oh, crap, darn.
It's okay. It's okay. Man, I have done 20 minutes mute. So I feel you. I feel you.
Yeah.
How you doing this morning? You doing okay?
Fantastic.
I want to hit with you the negotiations that are taking place between Trump and Putin in Riyadh. And it sounds like I was listening to Sergei Lavrov, and everybody sounds like they're on the same page. Everybody sounds like they want a deal. They've decided to resume diplomatic relations between the two. Lavrov even pointed out that they seem to be getting respect that was left off the table in the previous administrations. And of course, that's going to go a long way for some level of diplomacy. I am heartened by this. I think this is a good thing. I have been fascinated by liberals screaming at the top of their lungs that somehow ending a war is a bad thing. It is super bizarre to me because war typically is a bad thing. People usually acknowledge it as being a bad thing. And yet liberals have come to the conclusion that Donald Trump doing this is somehow a negative. Give me your take on this. What are your thoughts?
A couple of things. Number one, and that is the Democratic Party has become the war party. It's become
Yes.
the expression of the neocon movement, and the neocon movement is dying, or if not already dead. It's being put down by the ruling elite. They're done with it, and the Democrats are like the EU, the European Union. You know, they're holding on to that. They're wedded. I mean, the EU's leadership, they're wedded to that. And they can't accept the reality that it's gone. This is, one of the main reasons the Democratic Party is, dying out. I think it's also one of the main reasons that the Republican Party has snatched the mantle of, the defenders of the working class, even though they're not, but they've snatched the mantle. Because here's a reality. You can't be the working people's party and be the party of war. You know what I mean? Because, one of the things, if you look at the numbers now, I was going over some numbers, and since 2014, the USAID, the National Endowment for Democracy, probably been $600 billion of just those two regime change operations, right, in the last 10, 11 years. Also, if you look at the money that supposedly that we've given to the that we put into the Ukraine project, that's like $350 billion. You're upwards of $1 trillion spent just in those two things between USAID, NED, the Ukraine project, $1 trillion there, right? Another $1 trillion in the budget of for the military per year for 10 years. That's probably 10 trillion there. When you think of the numbers, the amount of money that's spent on the war machine that could be spent on the working class, you can't be the party of the working class. You can't claim to represent the working class if you're the party of war and they are the party of war. All the money, Jimmy, let me just say this, finished. Jimmy Carter talked about, I don't know if you remember this, he had this thing where he talked about how China had spent all of this money on infrastructure and research and all at the time that we've spent all of the money on war. And that's why they're ahead of us. So the Democratic Party is not the party of the working class. They're crumbling. They're just the party of war, which is the party of corruption and money going into the war machine and all. And they're done right now. It's sickening.
I'm so glad you brought that up. So this was on CNN, and it talked about this flip
said at the beginning
that has taken place in U.S. politics in regards to what the public wants. This is a fascinating clip. It should be terrifying to Democrats who are still going with this idea that, oh, it's just messaging. It's just messaging. We just need to make people feel better.
Donald Trump and the Republican Party has changed the electorate. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look at party identification, Democrats versus Republicans. You go back to 2017, 5 points more of the electorate was Democrats than Republicans. You go to 2021 when Joe Biden was starting out, look at that, 6 points more of the electorate was Democrats than Republicans. But look at what's happened in February of 2025. Look at this. Republicans, there are more Republicans in the electorate than there are Democrats. Republican +2. So Donald Trump and the Republicans have remade the electorate. They've turned some people over from being Democrats or independents to become Republicans. New folks have entered the electorate who are more Republican leaning. And so when you combine that with the fact that Republicans are really, really behind Donald Trump, all of a sudden you get a winning recipe whereby you break the normal rules of politics and give Donald Trump that positive net approval rating when he had pretty much a consistently negative one in term number one.
Garland, that's 8 points. That's not nothing. That's 8 points. That's an 8-point spread. Meaning, if Democrats were up 6 points during Joe Biden's term, that means over the course of 4 years, you got an 8-point shift from Democrat to Republican. That is not minor. And if that is momentum, which I call it momentum, that number could go higher. Like they're fundamentally missing something. And it's something that they're missing that may have long-term consequences to the electorate going forward. Like when people vote in an election, they vote for a particular person, let's say Trump or something like that. The body of ideas, it starts to get accepted as, okay, I'm open to this, whatever that is, I'm open to it. If those people are voting this way and those people are moving in this direction, those people may be with a Trumpian type going forward, meaning that is a big deal that number has shifted 8 points to the Republican direction. Give me your thoughts on this. And why do you think that's the case? Because I agree with you that part of it is, I think being anti-war splits the electorate. Because I think you get people like me who say, oh my God, people are being killed. That's horrible. We need to stop that. And there's no voice on the other side for that conversation at all. It's just not there. Kamala Harris would have been potentially got us into a third world war. I fully believe it. And since you don't have a voice on the liberal, on the left side, or the Democratic side, then you're stuck with this thing of, okay, the only person who's pushing for peace, at the very least on these kind of major wars, is Trump. And so it gives an end. It gives an opening in a way that may not have necessarily been there if there was some voice on the left that was anti-war. It's super weird. But give me your thoughts on your thinking on how that movement has taken place.
Yeah, there's another part that's not in the poll, I think, that's significant that would make it look much worse. Think of how many people who were Democrats and who just stayed home, particularly in the Black community, who've had enough, right? I bet you that, we've got an 8-point swing there. I bet there's another 8 to 10 of people that are just like, you know what, I'm done. I'm sitting home. I know so many people like that. I'm sure you do too, right? Mm-hmm. So it's far worse than those numbers even look for the Democrats. But, the Democratic Party ran Tulsi Gabbard out. They ran JFK Jr. I don't know if you remember his name. It's JFK Jr. I mean, RFK Jr. Just that name alone is going to give you a certain percentage, and certain people are going to long for the good old days of RFK and JFK and things of that nature, right? The Democrats run RFK Jr. and Tulsi. I believe that they win. I believe those two people are a winning combination. Might I have my issues with them in some areas? Sure, but they seem like rational people, right? And they had them, and they're gone. And why are they gone? Because they ran them out of the party. There's no place for you anymore in this party, which means people who look at them and say, I do have some questions about the war machine. I do have some questions about big pharma and big corporations and things like that I do have some issues about maybe plastics in our food or glyphosate or things that I can't pronounce. I got issues with some of those things. And when RFK Jr., at least he's saying some things maybe that I want to hear, right? You're going to get a certain amount of health food eating, organic eating people who say, hey, yeah, there we go. Let's go with that, right? The Democrats just ran everything out and it was all like, let's go with Israel all the way, Netanyahu. We got to stand up against Putin and things of that nature. So people probably figure if I'm going to get neoliberalism either way, you know, I'll go in a direction that seems a little more towards what I like, just a little something. And I'm going to add this. The Democrats are going to be in a really, really bad situation because at some point, I believe in order to get what they talk about as a long-term, a lasting or enduring deal with the Republicans, there's only one way to do it. And that's they're going to have to do a treaty, which has to be voted on, you know, in the Senate. And once it's confirmed and authorized in the Senate and voted, ratified, that's the term, in the Senate, then it's a treaty. It is effectively constitutionally the law of the United States. So at some point, Trump's going to come with a treaty with Russia, maybe China, who knows, but a treaty with Russia that says we will or won't do this. He's going to bring it to the Senate. We already know he's got the votes in the Senate to get anything he wants through, right? He can bully people if he wants, you know, Trump, but he'll get them. You know, he do the old mob, you put some chops here, vote for this, and they'll vote for it, right? And what do the Democrats do? What do the Democrats do when Trump comes with a treaty with Russia that says, all right, we're going to have peace. We're not going to do this or that. And he can get that. And whether it's anti-war, you know, Medea Benjamin or, you know, whoever, you or people, but all the anti-war community will look out and say, well, you know, Trump's a pain in the neck, but you got to sign this treaty. We want peace. And the Democrats are going to say, we can't do that. You're handing everything to Putin. And they're finished if they do that. If they don't do that, then they have to run away from their pro-war, John Bolton, Dick Cheney loving roots. And the party finishes, dissolve. You know what I mean? I'd love to see that treaty. I'll be in the street saying, let's have a rally like that, whether it was that Rage Against Machine rally or whatever kind of rally. Let's have a big rally that says to everybody in the Senate, you got to vote for this treaty. We want peace with Russia. I will be there, you know, carrying a street puppet. I don't care what it is. We got to have a treaty with Russia. Vote for it for peace. And I'm sure you will too. Who cares who's in charge?
I don't care. I don't care if that treaty comes from Trump. I just want the water stop. Like, I just find it to be outrageous that this many people are getting killed.
Yes.
For no good reason. I remember when this first started. And, you know, us working at the radio station, we were super focused on it because it was such a big deal. It was like, oh my God, these people are being killed in mass. This is astonishing. And all of the people in Europe and the US are lying. They're like their entire unprovoked war of aggression. It was built into the words lying. The framing of it was false. And so when I look at this, I think, okay, this is a catastrophe. This needs to stop, period. That's not the way they take it. And if they are brought to this kind of come to Jesus moment where they are positioned with, here's the treaty. This is a normalization of relationships between Russia and the United States. And it also ends the war, and it may have other stuff bundled into it. You're right. What are they going to do? Are they really going to say, no, we're not going to sign a peace treaty that ends a war? And you're going to get, and this is what I mean by split the opposition. You're going to get people who are actual lefties, real lefties, who may hate Trump, kind of like me, who's like, this is good. We should end the war. And what is the Democratic Party going to do with that contingent of the left that still remains in the Democratic Party that is against war, even if Trump is the one to end it? God, you're so right. Also, that number, that 8-point drift to Trump, that's called political power. That's called political, you are able to get your political way.
Yeah.
Which is why Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. were able to get in, regardless of the fact that many of those Republicans also hated Tulsi Gabbard. Like, meaning when Democrats pointed out, hey, you pointed out that we were involved in regime change wars. And Tulsi says, yes, because we were involved in regime change wars. No, I get that. It's the issue that you said it. That is also true for many Republicans. But those Republicans shut the hell up and they voted for Tulsi. And I think the same thing would be true for a peace agreement that Trump signs. They know that the gravity of the party is Trump. They're not going to trespass on that. The catch becomes, are there going to be enough Democrats who are going to take the backlash from, let's say, the anti-war coalition that is still part of the party when that peace deal comes up? Oh, that is fascinating. Oh,
Don't
that's
you think
fascinating.
so? It's on point. Because what are the Republicans saying? I mean, what are the Russians saying? It has to be enduring. It has to be a long.
Yes.
You know, when they came out of Riyadh, the one thing you heard, and I interviewed, what's his name, Ambassador Polyansky a while back, and we discussed, and that's one of the things the Russians have kept saying. Look, we got to have something long term. You know, when you get the next guy, anything could happen, right? And they came out of that. The only real way to do that is to have a treaty that is ratified in the Senate, and then it has the power of law under U.S. Constitution. And Trump can do that, and I suspect he will. And because he has enough votes to get it through without the Democrats, he's going to get it through. So then it becomes, the Democrats are like, well, we know he's going to get it through. Do they still keep this crap they're doing? I'm turning on the news or something, the MSNBC, CNN or whatever, and they're like, Trump is disrespecting Zelensky and he's not standing behind. And I'm like, dude, the war, it's over. This thing is done. It's over.
And to point out,
what are you doing here?
25% of Ukraine has been destroyed. Russia is continuing to advance, and Zelensky's military capability of stopping him is getting less and less by the hour. You're getting more Ukrainians dying faster, with them now saying, okay, we need to come up with a scheme to put in our kids. And the people say, Trump, by ending that, is doing a bad thing. Okay, those people are out of their minds. I don't know how any of this is standing up for Zelensky or standing up for Ukraine when Ukraine is getting fundamentally destroyed and never needed to take place. Like, those people are out of their minds if they think that this is somehow a benefit. One of those people is one of your favorite people, Rachel Maddow. Listen to this. I don't even know what to call it. It's outlandish. And again, we're talking about stopping a war. We're talking about stopping a war. This is Maddow's take on all of that. Keep in mind, Maddow spent a lot of her time for the last 3 years screaming Russia, 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 and pushed the Trump and Russia stuff, pushed all that nonsense. Wouldn't let that nonsense go. This is where she is today.
Repeatedly and eerily and in a very out of character way, tells the American people he is not allowed to discuss that relationship or his communications with that leader. The political reality of this administration is going to be shaped by whether or not the people who oppose him strongly enough and effectively enough. The political reality of this administration and this presidency will be determined by whether the people who voted for him are horrified enough by what they have wrought that they regret it and are willing to act differently and to speak out about their regret. The reality of this presidency and this administration will be determined in some part by whether or not Republican officials realize that their own survival as politicians depends not on sucking up to Trump, but by helping their constituents survive him. Strong evidence supporting all of those strikes against Trump so far, frankly. But this is one other thing to watch. If we really are now abandoning the free world and lining up instead with the world's dictatorships, and Trump is unwilling to even explain why, just watch. The American people are going to have some feelings about that too.
Clearly, she has not seen the previous poll with Democrats dropping 8 points. She is out of her goddamn mind. The American public is not for these wars. And truth be told, the only way to end the war is to, quote unquote, talk to these dictators because you lost on the battlefield. Meaning, this is so fantasy land that it is outrageous. Is Rachel Maddow willing to send American troops to fight the Russians over Ukraine? And if she is not, Rachel Maddow should shut the hell up. This idea that we should have these forever wars because we shouldn't talk to Kim Jong-un, we shouldn't talk to Vladimir Putin, is outlandish. You have lost. Your position is lost. You've lost in a hard power fight on the battlefield. And she is like, I guess we should keep this going. I mean, it's outlandish. Europeans are acting like children. JD Vance went over there and talked to him like the children to which they are acting like. Hegseth had to point out to him, you're living in a fantasy land. This is about hard power. Europe doesn't have it. Europe lost the war. The US lost the war. We'll pull it out. We're stopping. We're not going to go into the sunken, what is it called? Sunken fallacy or sunken thing fallacy, where you just keep putting bad money after good. To what end? Rachel Maddow needs to explain to what end. Like, I'm annoyed with these people to no end. I'm sorry, Garland. I put her on to give you a take. Give me your take on this. She is this histrionics, as somebody called it on Twitter. This drama that she's adding in the way that she's talking about this. I think that she is fundamentally wrong. I think that, yeah, Trump is going to fleece the American public. Agreed. On the issues of war and on the international stage, I think the public backs him. And I think that 8-point swing is hitting on something that she is fundamentally missing. Give me your take on this.
A couple of things. Number one, and I got to say, start with this. She's trying to grab the moral high ground, right? We are the moral party, and so therefore we got to stand up against Trump. The fact of the matter is this. The Democratic Party supported a genocide for 16 months and said they couldn't stop it. There's nothing they could do. It was out of their hands, and Trump just like sent his boy Witkoff over there and ended it in 5 minutes and put it with iron fist. So how can the Democrats can't accept the fact that even the polls said supporting a genocide means you'll never have the moral high ground again. So don't try to take the moral high ground against Trump. Forget it, but she can't stop doing it. Number one. The other thing is this. She's using a dead language. She might as well be talking in Latin. The dead language was a language of narrative, right? It was the neocon language. The Russians are fighting with shovels. The Russians have run out of missiles. Every 2 months, the Russians have run out of missiles, and then there's another barrage of missiles, right? The Russians, they're throwing human waves and North Korean soldiers. You just say whatever you want to say. You just make up a narrative and you say that's true. Right. Trump is a Russian bot. You go back to Russiagate. So during the Biden administration, they really got to this point of narrative where you just make up reality and you say it as though it's true. And part of that is Russiagate. Trump is a Russian bot, as it were, as were you and I. Right. And now with Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. around, let's just be honest. They're just calling it like it is. You know what? They're not going to beat Trump literally said it shouldn't have started. Russia has this gigantic arm. He has his way of saying things that are reality. He said this. They beat Napoleon. They beat the Nazis. It's a war machine. They were never going to beat them with Ukraine. Ukraine's not going to win now. They're losing now, and they're never going to win in the future. These things are facts. It's factual. So while the Trump administration, for all of the things, their domestic things they're doing here that I don't like, they're using a factual context for foreign policy. And she's still back in that regime change narrative, John Bolton crap, Russiagate garbage that's crumbling. It's sad. And let me add this. This is another reason I so despise the Democratic Party. So the Trump people are talking about, we need to cut Medicaid and cut this or that. That goes to the poorest Americans. You need to have an opposition party that says, no, you don't cut programs for the poorest people so you can give more money to the rich. You know what I mean? You need an opposition party for those kind of basic domestic policies. You need a voice. The Democrats are not screaming, oh, no, they're going to cut Medicaid. They're screaming they're going to cut regime change money to USAID so they can regime change Georgia and Romania. They're not screaming, don't cut Medicaid, more money. We can't cut programs for the poor or people who are laid off or things like that. The Democrats are saying we can't stop sending money to the military industrial complex so they can drag us into a nuclear war that's going to kill us all. It's a damnable, despicable party that is nothing but a mouthpiece for a dying a regime change, a neocon language and ideology dead. It's pathetic. We're sitting here watching this and we can't believe our eyes. Let me just say this. You and I know we're belittled for the last several years for being Sputnik. And I don't know about you. I felt at Sputnik that part of my job was to try to prevent nuclear war. In my heart, yes. I felt part of my job was to do whatever little thing I could do to prevent nuclear war. We were attacked and eventually run out of town, basically. And where are the Democrats? We were fighting the Democrats more than the Republicans on that. And now I look at Rachel Maddow and I'm like, man, I'm glad that party is dead. But we need something to rise to speak for the poor people. We don't have that voice now.
Oh, it's so true. Like when I first got the job, and I remember we hit on Nord Stream. And initially I was like, okay, this is getting boring. Why are we continuously talking about this pipeline? And then the war started. And I was stunned. Like, I was just stunned. I got to be honest. I, for one, I didn't think Putin was going to go in. I don't know anybody that at the network that thought he was going to go in. So everybody was shocked. On top of being shocked, when it became clear, okay, the special military operation is not a war. It is inflaming. It is getting bigger. And then the U.S. took its position in it effectively. We're going to push for as long as it takes. And so it's like you ended up being in opposition to your own government at the radio station. Even though it was a little podunk station, the U.S. government took an interest in the fact that we existed. And not just took an interest, took a direct interest. I remember I was on a flight, I believe, to Kuala Lumpur. And I forget where I was, but I saw Antony Blinken come out. And Blinken clearly stated that we are passing sanctions now against RT and Sputnik directly. Yeah, the parent companies. And I was sitting there like, oh, God, what the hell does this mean? It is a very weird thing when the U.S. government goes directly after you, as if you are somehow this kind of dangerous thing. And it's like, I define my job as, okay, be the honest arbiter. What's true in this? And what was true in this is that we are inflaming a war that didn't need to happen. And so a lot of my monologues and a lot of the stuff I talk about would be, oh my God, I can't believe this war is still going. At some point, somebody's going to turn around and ask, what was this for? And they're going to tally up 1 million people dead. They're going to tally up the 500 billion spent, or whatever that number was. They're going to tally up the broken bodies. And they're going to say, what was it for? And they're going to say, what was it for in the context of Russia winning? Meaning they're going to have to count their nuts after the fact under this model that A, it never needed to start, and B, you've just lost 25% of your territory and you've just lost 500,000, if not more, human beings. That is mind-blowing to me. Like, that wasn't entirely conceptual. That was, no, this is happening in earnest. And we are backing, A, the losing side, but B, the side that is provoking it, considering we overthrew the government in 2014. I just cannot wrap my head around how this was taking place, how like quickly it could spark. And then when it got to this whole thing where nuclear doctrine was changing, and Joe Biden changed the nuclear doctrine, Putin changed the nuclear doctrine, the Repression was launched, effectively saying, look, we have played around with you. Don't push us. Like when that commentary was coming out. And it's like, oh my God, they're going to end the world. If Kamala Harris wins, she's going to end the world. It was that. I felt that way with Hillary Clinton, by the way, when Hillary Clinton was running and she said she wanted to put up a missile defense shield in Syria. And you're like, okay, well, you're doing that because the Russians are there. So what are you going to do? Shoot down a Russian plane? Is that your plan? Like you're trying to bring us to a third world war, meaning one of the political spectrums seemingly was trying to take us to a third world war, and they weren't stopping. They kept pushing. And so it puts me in a weird space because in one sense, it's like, okay, Trump's an ogre. By the same token, this ogre wants to have a different policy of dealing with countries around the globe, a policy I accept and agree with. Whereas the other party seemed to be in a fantasy land. They don't seem to take the guardrails for what they are. And Putin even mentioned this. He was like, I don't get these people who don't seem to take reality for what it is. This world could end. And it could end based on something that happens where it sparks off, where there is no backstop. And you get Europeans who are in a fantasy land who, because they're in a fantasy land, could bring us to the brink of oblivion. It's that part. I don't see reality in liberals today. I just don't. And so, and I'm sorry, I'm going on too long about this, but I remember I was talking to my ex-girlfriend. She's Austrian. And she was complaining that all of these right-wing parties were winning in Europe. And as I pointed out to her, liberals are delusional. The right wing may say stuff that's kooky. They may say stuff like, she was pointing out this kind of conversation where they spent 10 minutes one of the right-wing parties in Austria saying that Muslims were coming after their schnitzel. And it sounds funny. It sounds goofy. It is goofy. But that same party that will spend 10 minutes on stage talking about Muslims coming after schnitzel is also the party that says, why are we engaging these wars? Why are we having these fights? Why are we taking policy that is against the best interests of our own populations? And as I pointed out to her, the public would accept the nonsense about schnitzel if you tell them, hey, we are not going to be engaged in policy that hurts our own self-interest. It's that part. Liberals have missed that somewhere along the way. When you point out this idea of Musk, Trump going after Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, that is not the Democratic argument. It's not. It wasn't the argument during the Clinton thing. It wasn't an argument under Obama. It wasn't the meaning they are not taking a substantive stance on issues at home that affect workers to their betterment in a non-negligible way. And they are also a pro-war party. And so you get lefties like me who should have been or should be in the Democratic Party, not for both of those reasons. And it is both of those things that they are supposed to be. I'm not wrong in my take on that party. Neither are you. And I went on too long. Please add to that.
Well, a couple of things. I think that where we are now is, both parties are dysfunctional and neoliberal parties in a way when it comes to domestic policy, when it comes to economic and monetary policy, right? I also think that, I'm watching the libertarians and the MAGA people, and they're like, yay, DOGE is here to save us. I'm like, the richest man in the world is here to save you. Come on, guys, let's be realistic here. The rich, it's this billionaire worship, and we've seen it in the Democrat, or whether it's Soros or whoever on one side of the party, and this guy's funding things to help us, and now the libertarians and the MAGA people, sad to say, they've gripped on to now they think that they still think some billionaires are here to save us. That being said, foreign policy, this is the most reasonable foreign policy I've seen in probably my lifetime, to be frank. And I'll say this. What I see coming out of Riyadh is basically this. This is basically the Trump administration to the Russians. The Russians are like, "Hey, we're angry. They're on our border doing bad things," and the Trump administration is like, "Will you please get this Nazi-infested crap hole off of our hands? We're sick. We hate it. Please, please take it. We want to talk about investments and joint ventures in the Arctic. We're trying to eat, dude. Well, how can we make money here? Please, it is not. We're going to stand up because we don't want to give up Odessa or something." The Trump administration could care less. This is a burden right now, literally. Now, well, think about this. Weeks ago, Zelensky said, we can't continue fighting without support from the U.S. If the U.S. abandons us, then we can't continue. And now he's in like a Twitter war or something with Trump. He's like, yeah, Trump, he's did this and that and all that. And Trump is basically sends his boy Vance. Did you read that thing that Vance said? All the stuff, the warnings that Vance gave to Zelensky? I
saw it.
He's
don't
like,
bite the hand that feeds you.
Yeah, and he's like, hey, you're not dealing with the Biden administration anymore. You're dealing with the Trump administration. Don't disrespect the boss, or things ain't going to work out well for you. Know what I mean? It was like the mafia sending a made man to warn you, hey, you disrespected the boss here. Don't let it happen again. You know what I mean? But you look at that and you're like, that's the same mentality. He's reflecting the whine and crying simps in the EU. They're crying, curled up in a fetal position, sucking it. Trump's going to take our war. Oh, they look pathetic. Rachel Maddow, yes, Russiagate is real. We must go back to Russiagate. And Trump's a puppet for Putin. When we're like, what planet are these people on? Let's end this war. And it's obvious that the ruling elite in this country are making a U-turn. They've decided, we're not doing this anymore. Forget Trump. Trump is working for the rule. He have some input, I'm sure, but it's clear the ruling elite have done a complete U-turn. They're going in a different direction. And I'm like, you better get on the train, you know, or you're going to get run over by the train. That's the fact of the matter. When you see these billionaires saying, we're going to do it this way, you get on that train. As far as Maddow and them, that I see, MSNBC is going to shut down. It's got to. Look at the numbers. Who supports them anymore? You know what I mean? And I talk to people who are Democrats. I don't know about you, like friends and family, and I just shake my head when some of the things I hear them saying. They think they're in 2017 again, where they can be the resistance. Really? So the resistance wants war. The resistance wants to continue war with the superpower. The resistance is mad because we stopped the genocide. They don't want to say that's a good thing. That's the resistance? What are you resisting anymore? The resistance, what are they resisting? I don't know. They're not resisting cuts to Medicaid. Resist that. It's pathetic to watch what this thing, and I watch Jeffries. Have you seen
he's so pathetic. He's so pathetic.
He looks beaten, doesn't he? If you look at him, he's like, his head's down. He looks sad. Well, he talks. I think we've got to get to the point where the voters feel us. I'm like, feel? Yeah, what are you talking about? Where we make the voters feel what we're doing. I'm like, he doesn't have anything to say.
Yeah, he's a broken,
sad and beaten group.
Yep, pathetic, broken party represented by a broken man.
If Trump makes peace between now and the midterms, they're going to lose seats. They ain't going to gain them.
Oh, and by the way, midterms is usually where the opposition wins seats. If they lose seats in the midterms, they have put up no defense. They have been whiners and complainers. Some of the stuff they have to complain about, I even agree with. But it's not like there's substance behind it to represent anything. And I got to point out something else. Gonzalo Lira. Thankfully, somebody has mentioned his name and has mentioned him, A, as an American, and B, was killed by the Ukrainians. The Biden administration didn't seem to care about the fact that an American was murdered by the Ukrainians. Elon Musk brings it up. This is Musk talking about it. And again, it should be shocking to Americans that an American was killed in a Ukrainian prison, but the Biden administration didn't seem to care.
Elon Musk just called out the NATO global.
I can't hear you. You're unmuted.
I'm sorry. Elon Musk,
there you go. Okay.
There we are. Elon Musk brings up Gonzalo Lira. And I thought it was a text or tweet or something like that. I thought he mentioned him, but he might have put it in a tweet.
Let me share something with you. I got something here that people might want to see related to that.
Oh, please.
Let me do that. There you go. Put that up.
Thank you.
Ukrainian, that's a 21st Century Wire. Ukrainian whistleblower, how the SBU robbed and killed it. And they go on, and there's a guy that apparently was in prison or something by Dubinsky, right? This guy goes on, and there's a video. And basically he says, so you can see that there. So people can go to 21st Century Wire, how the SBU robbed and killed if they want to see it. But let me say this. If you look at it, basically the guy says, Lira had like $70,000 in a bank or something in that country, and they, forced him to sign transfer the money over to them, and then they beat him and his ribs broke. You know what I mean? So basically they robbed him and stole his money. And
they put him in a cage. I mean, Lira was very critical of the Ukrainian government. Lira was reporting on the ground what was happening in Ukraine as it was happening.
Interviewed on his channel. He interviewed me. He contacted me and interviewed me on his channel one day. And I talked, and he said, great. He was far to the right. There was things I didn't agree with, but he was doing God's work, as you say.
He was doing God's work.
He was opposing the Nazis. He was honest. He was telling the truth. And in the end, did you see where some documents came out? I think FOIA documents. Did you see those FOIA documents about? I didn't see him, but I saw a report where the State Department was having discussions about him. And they were saying, we're getting requests about him. What are we going to do? So they knew what was going on and they didn't act. These things that happen are going to come out. That what happened is going to come out.
Well, the fact that Musk is bringing it up has reporting all over the place about it. And to be very clear, he was initially captured, put in a cage. When he came out several days later, because nobody knew what had happened to him at that point, he came out and he was like, look, they took my equipment, I've been threatened. And he knew his life was at risk. And at some point, they came back to get him. And that was the end of it. He never came out of the prison.
The other thing in the forward came out, apparently he was like trying to escape and go into the border. And apparently the US government like notified the border that he was en route to stop him or something. I mean,
Wow.
It's horrible. This stuff needs to come out. And I hope, I don't know if it will, I hope that maybe the House or somebody convenes something on there and calls the State Department people and has their emails and documents and calls them and has a hearing and you know, under oath. And these people need to be held accountable for this kind of stuff.
I agree with you. 1,000% agree with you.
That could be you and me. That could have been you or me.
I definitely wanted, you're right. Because, you know, because if you think about the kill list, if I'm not mistaken, Tulsi Gabbard, I don't know if she was on the list, so I'm not going to say Tulsi Gabbard.
She was on the list. Well, I think if I'm not mistaken, she was still on the list when she got confirmed.
So is Scott Ritter.
Yeah.
So is Scott Ritter. And it's like, when you think about this stuff was being funded by the US government, and these are American citizens that are either killed or on a kill list. And let's be very clear, they have been knocking people off of that kill list. So they have taken a direct concerted effort to eliminate people that were in opposition to the war. So I don't think that's minor. I think you're right. It's a big deal that we are funding Ukraine to the degree to which we're funding them, and then they would turn around and kill Americans. That is outlandish. That takes place, and that the Biden administration not just didn't do anything about it, but at the very least was given information about it. Like, it's just astonishing to me. The last thing I want to hit, DEI. There was an article, I believe it was in Politico, and the argument that the article was making was that Democrats lost the culture war because they invested so much in the DEI programs. All right. This guy is pointing out some of the stats on this, and it is fascinating. I have always pointed out that the biggest benefactor to DEI programs were white women. I'm sorry, to affirmative action programs were white women. All right. The DEI program, something similar is true, that the biggest benefactor to DEI programs were effectively white liberals. They were the ones who were getting hired for these jobs.
Coleman posted this on Twitter. Take notice, when DEI jobs die out due to unpopularity, white leftists will make it sound like black people are mostly affected. Truth is, this was always a grift for white mediocre college graduates. Their worthless degrees was ideal for an industry that doesn't require thinking. This comes from Zippa.com. He has this great chart on here. It says Chief Diversity Officer Statistics by race and gender. White, 76.1%. Hispanic or Latino, 7.8%. Asian, 7.7%. Unknown, 3.9%. Black or African American, 3.8%. American Indian, Alaska Native, 0.7%. Male income, $99,575. Female income, $91,254.
I'm going to stop right there for a bit, because that by itself is funny. Ideally, you would think these are liberal groups who often complain about women not having equal pay with men. And in what seems to be, or at the very least supposed to be, DEI programs that include women, they still get hit by not being in equal pay. There's an irony there that is just fantastic. On the other part to that, 70-something% of these programs are effectively run by whites. So even in programs that are supposed to deal with this notion of diversity, equity, inclusion, blacks are not. We're only at 3%. That's astonishing. Like, I maybe my tenor or take on this is off. My thinking would be for programs like this that you would have a larger share of blacks, larger share of Hispanics, because you're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there's also this other thing of what it even means. Republicans have taken this to mean black and unqualified, which is just racist on its face. It's a dog whistle, like affirmative action was used as a dog whistle. By the same token, though, you think to yourself, okay, let's give it the greatest spirit that you can give it. What does it even mean? Meaning, if you can put the best spin on it, what would be the outcome that you would want from these programs? And was that outcome fulfilled? And has it been to our detriment that these programs haven't necessarily had the bang for the buck that you would expect it to have? Meaning, is it true that Democrats lost the culture war for pushing DEI so hard in lieu of economic populism?
Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay? Okay. Here's my opinion on DEI. It goes back to this. It goes back to whether it was Malcolm X or Martin Luther King, and all of them at some point came to the conclusion that, the white liberal didn't exactly have the best policies for black folks, right? Whoever worked long enough in that, Martin Luther King was after a while like, the white liberals, right? Here's the thing about it. The federal office of DEI opened in 2021, right? So it was around like 3.5 years or so, right? Are we to believe that the 3.5 years of DEI changed somehow the landscape for black folks? That, now that that's gone, we're all going to... There was a infrastructure for black people to utilize if they felt that there was discrimination in the workplace, EEOC, all that kind of stuff, right? EEOC laws and rules and things of that nature, right? That they were there. DEI didn't change any of that. To me, DEI is a fraud. And here's what I mean. When I see what I've seen of DEI, it's basically this. It's like Hollywood. When you see an advertisement and they got a black woman, a white woman, a Latino person, the gay person, that every single advertisement or every movie, the women who are superheroes have to be a diverse group of fill in the blank. I remember Marvel came up, people don't even know it, nobody went to see it, this movie called Echo. And the woman who was a superhero, but she was a female who was Native American, who was deaf, and who had like one leg cut off. And that was the superhero. And everybody was like, wow, literally, look it up, Echo, the superhero, right? That's DEI. That is the symbolism, giving the look, the symbolic look. If a black woman is now a member of a corporate board for some neoliberal company that's robbing the hell out of all of us. Now, symbolically, because a black woman is in charge, right? Because they put a black general in charge of AFRICOM that's going to oppress and bomb the hell out of and drone and kill a bunch of Africans. I'm supposed to feel great. We've got a DEI now. We've got equity and inclusion. DEI during slave time would have been, we have a female trans person who's in charge of whipping the slaves every day to make sure they pick enough cotton. And so the slaves should be happy because they have a representative, you know what I mean? They have representation, right? Now, it's like the modern white liberal idea of feminism, right? As opposed to, what did it used to be? Women's liberation. What did it used to be, like during Martin Luther King, it was black liberation. They used a whole different language. It was, we must be liberated from oppression. We must get a fair shot. And what did Martin Luther King work on? What was his 1963 march? What did they ask for? They asked for a $2 minimum wage. It was a march for jobs. It wasn't just a march for black folks. It was a march for jobs and economic. You see what I mean? So what happened was, DEI was another area where the white liberal class could snatch this idea of economic liberation and say women should be treated fairly, black people, all people should be treated fairly, and the working class should be treated fairly. And that's all one bubble we have to work in, right?
Yeah.
If we have symbolism, the DEI, a perfect example is when they say we should have more women and minorities in the boardroom. You've seen these things in the boardroom and representation for Fortune 500 companies. Well, black folks and women who are trying to get in the boardroom of a Fortune 500 company are already wealthy. They're already rich. So you're going to get symbolism. It is nothing but symbolism. It is crap. It does not help the Black person who lives in a poor neighborhood, who doesn't have decent schools, who's afraid of crime, who Black folks may be in there. Some people may want drug rehab. They may want free college. That would have helped them. Healthcare, that would have helped them. If you're fighting for healthcare for people in that, poor white folks in Appalachia, don't they need the same things?
Yep.
If I go on a reservation for the Indians where 30% of the people don't have running water, right? That's something that I fight for. That's not DEI. That's the material needs of poor people.
Yes.
DEI doesn't address poor people and the impoverished and the least among us. Isn't that what Martin Luther King talked about? The least among us. This is symbolism. And most of the time, the symbolism is only addressed in Hollywood or in the corporate boardrooms or in somewhere where it's equity and inclusion and diversity. It is about looking like you're working for justice and putting up. It's even worse to me in a way, because if I have a picture in the boardroom or whatever, or in a movie of a Black person, a gay person, a white person, or this and that, and I have the symbolism of that, but yet the poor people in the community can't even afford to buy a ticket to that movie. You know what I mean? You're not doing anything. It's about looking like you're doing something to help minority groups and not even saying, well, how about this? If Jay-Z and his wife and their son or daughter is a Black child or you know, whatever, does that person have the same material needs as the Black child who lives in the poverty in the ghetto? No. So, oh yes, they're young Black men who we've got to work out for. Not all young Black men. Some young Black men, their parents are doing pretty damn good, and some of them are poor. Meanwhile, the young Black child who is impoverished has the same exact material needs as the young white child who lives in Appalachia where there used to be coal mines. It is recognizing identity politics is the enemy of economic politics.
Why do you
think DEI is the enemy of economic politics? Go ahead.
Why do you think they chose that as a tip of the spear as opposed to economic populism? Because you're right. When I was at the Sanders thing, they were whites, Blacks, gays, straight, everything in between. And in having everything in between, all of you, or all of us, were united under this idea of an economic populist message, because it was understood that the message affected everybody. Like, it wasn't, I'm carving up these groups. So this person is Black, this person is white, this person is gay, this person is straight, this person is whatever. And I'm making different messages for each that in no way touches the material conditions of those people, but I'm directing my message at Hispanics. And so, hey, we're going to have less of you deported. Congratulations. For Blacks, we're going to do something about criminal justice. For so-and-so, we're going to do something on the, as opposed to parsing these people to say, all of you have to pay your car note. All of you have to pay your house note. All of you have to pay for energy and for basic expenses. And so let's deal with the material realities. That seemed to be the most natural thing in the world, considering it affects everybody. Why do you think they decided on DEI as a tip of the spear as opposed to that economic populism?
Well, because they're the representative of an economic class who is benefiting from the ideology of neoliberalism, right? So they get two bonuses out of it. They can scream for, you know, this diversity kind of thing so that Black or people or women or whatever, Native Americans can sit in their impoverished, you know, little, cardboard put together homes on the reservations and with no running water, which is totally and completely unfair. That's a forgotten group, but they can sit there and they can see a Native American superhero named X who's getting the millions of dollars to be on this movie, and they can say we won, and they don't have to say how much is it going to cost us to run water and clean things to, and electricity and everything to all of these reservations where the people desperately need these kinds of things. It's a lot cheaper. Meanwhile, the people who sponsor the Democrats and the Republicans both, can continue to, with their government contracts, they can continue to make a fortune. They don't have to share their wealth, etc. And the other part is this. And additionally, this kind of racial stuff and this kind of diversity kind of stuff in the way that they present it actually divides the working class. So a women's liberation movement that said women should be respected and treated fairly, even if a woman decides that she wants to get married and not work if they can afford it, and she wants to work, she wants to raise her kids or whatever, that's a decision that people make, and it's and to say we respect that. And if that woman chooses to do that, we must respect that. But no, the only thing that can happen is a woman has to be, it's just as the same as a guy. And then they have to be in the boardrooms and they have to do all this thing. The women's feminism movement, actually, you hate men. Remember, Believe Women? Believe Women was like, hate all men. Women are all telling the truth and men are all liars. And any claim made against, I don't care if a woman comes out of a mental institution. If a woman gets off for, like, she just murdered 7 people, but she says the guard tried to feel my butt. We have to believe her, not the guard. She's in prison for mass murder, waiting for life. But we got to believe her, not the guard, because she's a woman. Those things are ridiculous and absurd. And what happens ultimately? You now pit women, working class, poor, struggling women against working class, poor, struggling men, working class, poor, struggling Black folks against working class, poor, struggling white folks. And now you can continue to divide and conquer so that the working class and poor, struggling people don't all come together and recognize what they have in common and that they have a common enemy and a common, as Malcolm X said, a common enemy, a common oppressor, right? And that is the ruling elite. They don't want you to have that kind of conversation.
Yeah, they don't want it. Garland, my man, always appreciate these conversations. The audience loves you. They always love you. You always are welcome on this platform. Garland Nixon, political analyst, also host of his own YouTube channel. Definitely check out Garland's show. Garland, do you come on every day? I wasn't certain. I see you periodically when you pop up in my thing. I think I was even on your video the other day. When do you present? When do you appear? When do your channel?
Well, there's no rhyme or reason. I have a couple people that I usually have on regularly, at different times, but that can vary. So, I wish I had a steady schedule, but I really don't.
Okay, fair enough. But definitely
pretty much most days, I'm going to have a video on at some point. Okay,
definitely check out his channel. It's fantastic. Garland and I usually show up on Fridays also together. Usually
so this Friday. How's this Friday look for you?
It looks fine. We should be fine on this Friday, even if it's a little bit later in the day.
Okay, let me know.
We will present. Now, man.
One more thing.
Please.
I just posted on my channel this a little over a year ago. I did this video and I talked about how the U.S. would eventually leave Ukraine. And I said they're going to exercise the Samsonite option. And I have a picture of a Samsonite luggage. And I'm like, they're going to just one day wake up and walk the hell out of here like they do in every single time, right? And so people have been saying, yeah, you hit the nail on the head on that one. So I just posted that on my video, the Samsonite option.
Oh, I love it. It's like, I told you so. It's a I told you so video. My man, right. Garland, thank you for this. I appreciate it. Be safe, man.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Have a good one. Always love him. That's my man, Garland Nixon. Let's go to the chat. Lee Camp is going to be joining us at 9:15. He was nice enough to say yes for today. But let's go to the chat for a bit. We have Adrian Dittman. DW, yeah, it was absolutely embarrassing. What is it? Leather Club talks specifically about JBP. Okay, the chat is in their own world right now. This is branded ass hair. Great stream. Thank you, ass hair. Christian praying, Garland speaking truth. Yes, he is. Holly Home, thank you. Holly, back at you. Thank you too. Guys, if you dig this content and you find yourself coming back here often, you can always support this content through PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, Super Chats. You can also become a member. That also works. Also, definitely like the video, share the video. All of that stuff helps the channel. It helps us grow. And I want to bring in my man, Lee Camp. Lee Camp, he is part, or at the very least, his new show, Redacted Tonight, that is going to be premiering today. Lee, welcome to the show, man. How you doing? You doing all right?
I'm doing good. Actually, I'm calling it unredacted tonight. So
unredacted tonight. What did I call it? Unredacted tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, the original was Redacted Tonight, which ran for 8 years. People are probably familiar with that, and it's been gone for 3 years, as you know, and I'm bringing back a version of it. So.
Well, badass. Definitely check Lee out with that show. He is an American stand-up comedian, actor, writer, and activist. And his show will be tonight. I'm glad you could join me, man. You doing all right?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, hanging in there and all the suppression and shit show we're seeing. Yeah.
Well, the suppression and stuff, maybe if not coming to an end, maybe curbed, especially with the negotiations that are taking place. Give me your take on this. Like you said, you worked on the network for a bit. How do you view the conversation that's taking place between Moscow and the U.S. now in order to resume diplomatic relations in the war in Ukraine and to restore normalization of relations between the United States and Russia? What are your thoughts on this? Just as stepping into it.
Well, first of all, just from taking a step back and looking at it, world leaders should always be speaking to each other. This whole idea of I'm not talking to you because I'm angry with you is just, it's childish and it's idiocy. And I think the real reason that the U.S., empire under Biden, but a lot of the efforts to create this proxy war were going on under Trump, whether he knew it or not. But a lot of what the reason that they never wanted to speak to Putin is because they knew they wanted the proxy war. Like the ruling elite in America wanted the proxy war. And so talking to Putin did nothing because they just wanted to keep it going. Whereas, there's a lot of awful stuff to say about Trump, and I've probably said it all. I am no Trump fan, but there are certain areas where he is right. And the neoliberal, let's create war around the world and put us at the brink of nuclear war is wrong. And this is one of them. And there should be no proxy war in Ukraine. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians should not be dead right now. And believe it or not, in a matter of weeks, there's a million other things awful he's done, but in a matter of weeks, he took us has taken us significantly back from the brink of nuclear war.
Yes, agreed. 1,000% agreed. It is coming out right now, and this is funny to me. Trump has been bashing Zelensky. He has been putting a knife in him. And one of the clips came out where he called him a dictator and everything else. Zelensky has apparently killed Truth Social in Ukraine, right here. This is fascinating to me. The balls on him for doing this. This is not going to turn out well for him. I'll just say it that way. But Truth Social is currently unavailable in Ukraine. And apparently many Ukrainians are pointing out that they don't have access to it. Give me your take on that. Trump is not going to tolerate this. J.D. Vance put out his own message effectively saying, don't bite the hand that feeds you. This is definitely biting the hand that feeds him. He's in a pissing match with Donald Trump when Donald Trump is effectively ending the war.
True. I would say making Truth Social unavailable somewhere is kind of like walling off part of Antarctica. No one was there to begin with.
Right. Nobody's there, right? Nobody's there. But it is the president's account.
Yeah. It was his thing, and I'm sure Trump is pissed, and it's not going to end well for him. But hilariously, this is a U.S. puppet. Zelensky was put into place by powerful interests in Britain and the United States to create a proxy war or something similar, and that is where it is led. And he is out on a limb here. No matter how this ended, it was not going to end well for Zelensky. I mean, it might end in a Gaddafi fashion, or it might end with him going and living in his mansion in, Rio or something. But it's not gonna end with him, continuing to be president. And he has put himself on a limb with the U.S. empire, where it's just like, unless we keep going down this path of having giant missiles at his back, ready to fire into Russia, there's no other option.
Well, Trump is continuously talking about elections. And one of the other interesting parts, Kellogg, people initially in the beginning, people like me were like, oh my God, Kellogg is saying something different than what Trump wants. Fast forward, we find out that Kellogg's job was effectively to just babysit Europe and to hear all of the complaints that are coming out of Europe while the adults in the conflict and reshape the world based upon Trump's idea of what that world should look like in a geopolitical sense. This is Kellogg. And the reason why I'm playing this clip is because it's clear at this point that this idea that Zelensky gets the ear of the president is off the table. He has been relegated to having conversations
to the kids' table.
He's been relegated to the kids' table. So this is Kellogg, I guess, making that point clear.
Good. Well, look, it's good to be back in Kyiv again. To have some wonderful talks with President Zelensky and staff and military commanders. It's kind of nice that I'm here just a few days before the third anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It's a chance to have some good substantial talks. We have a chance to see President Zelensky and his team down in Munich.
Basically, we had the chance to have talks with Zelensky. These are going to be central talks. While I'm here in Munich having these talks, as Marco Rubio, Wysikoff, Hegseth was in Munich. But basically, while these people negotiate, I am going to have talks with Zelensky. Meaning, it's not Trump having talks with Zelensky. It's Kellogg. He is at the kids' table, as you point out. He is having that. This is fascinating to me. Like, the world has fundamentally shifted within a very few days. And I don't necessarily entirely know where to place it, but it seems like Trump is serious about ending this war and has taken a blowtorch to Zelensky in his framing of events to do it. This is Trump talking about Zelensky having a 4% approval rating in Ukraine, and that they need to have elections. Effectively, we need to get rid of the guy that is the impediment to peace in Ukraine.
Well, Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It's been a long time since we've.
Well, I was just gonna play the clip, but go for it. I played this clip to the audience before, so the audience doesn't really need to see the clip again. Give me your take on that.
I was just going to say, Trump takes the veil or the mask off of a lot of the behaviors of the ruling elite in the U.S., the U.S. empire. And one of the facts he's revealing is Zelensky has never mattered. Zelensky has been a placeholder. The U.S. has told him how to behave, and he's been doing it. But now Trump is going the opposite direction, and Zelensky still doesn't matter. But now it's not the direction Zelensky wants to go. But he's never mattered. If you look at in that first month, when Russia invaded Ukraine, but we know the proxy war started long before that. But if you look at that first month, there was a peace deal on the table. I'm sure you've talked about it many times that was going to be signed. And that was where Zelensky was headed. He was headed to sign something that would stop Russia from destroying his country. And Boris Johnson and the U.S. come in and say, no, you're not allowed to have peace. We're not going to back you if you sign that agreement. And they just tear it up. And it's been in that position ever since. And so Zelensky didn't matter 1 month in, and he doesn't matter now. It's just that Trump is publicly saying he doesn't matter, which is not the story that the U.S. wanted to tell the world until now. So that's really the biggest difference. One other kind of deeper point I want to make is this is a bit of good cop, bad cop from the United States, even though I know liberals hate what Trump's doing. But it's basically like bad cop was Biden and the U.S. creating just straight up war in Ukraine. good cop against Russia in order, and their aim was to separate Russia from Europe, one of the biggest ones, but they also want to separate Russia from China. The first one worked. The second one very much did not work. Now you have good cop going in and saying, I'm no longer going to create war with you in Ukraine. And in return, and I'm sure this is in the negotiations, although Putin's not going to do it, in return, I want you to align more with us and stop aligning with China. Like work economically with the U.S., don't work with China. Putin's not going to do it because he's not an idiot. He knows how the U.S. behaves. Every other year we change our mind or we use something as a trick. So I would be seriously surprised if it worked, but it's the same aim. The aim has not changed. It's just whether we're murdering Ukrainians that's changed.
Yes. Oh, really good point. Speaking about the election thing in Ukraine and speaking about that, this is Trump once again going after Zelensky. And the reason why I'm showing this is because I want to show another article that came out of the Independent that has a fascinating title that is just mind blowing. But this is Trump talking about doubling down on Zelensky.
He refuses to have elections. It's low in the real Ukrainian polls. I mean, how can you be high with every city is being demolished? It's hard to be high. Somebody said, oh, no, his polls are good. Give me a break. Every city is being demolished. They look like a demolition site, every single one of them. And the only thing he was really good at was playing Joe Biden like a fiddle. He played him like a fiddle. That's an expression we use, yes, sir, to say that he's pretty easy, A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast because that war is going in the wrong direction. In the meantime, we're successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something I'll admit that only Trump is going to be able to do in the Trump administration. We're going to be able to do it. I think Putin even admitted that.
The way he talks is utterly hilarious to me.
I love that Trump now seems bored by his own garbage. Like he used to deliver that with such energy. Oh, no one can do it but Trump. Now he's like, no one can do it but Trump.
Well, you said the same thing for like several months or like a year. You might get tired of saying it. Here's the article that came out from this. So it says there are concerns that the Ukrainian president could be voted out of office if the country holds elections. Okay, well, it's an election. It's like it's an election. Yeah, you may be voted out of office in an election because it's an election. That's the entire point of it. It's hilarious to me that they are screaming at the top of their lungs, oh my God, I can't believe that Donald Trump is accusing Ukraine, or for that matter, Europe, of starting the war. And I'm like, but they did start the war. Like they did blow off elections. They did blow off the Minsk agreements. They did blow off any notion of fair representation of East Ukraine all of that's true. And we had elections during the Civil War. Why can't they? Zelensky is using this idea of, well, the Russians want it, and because the Russians want it, that's enough of a reason for me not to hold elections. Okay, dude, you're missing the point. You're missing the point.
Well, and I'm sure he's been advised by the U.S. back under the Biden administration not to have elections. And the reason the U.S. didn't want him to is because they feared that a non-puppet gets in power.
Yes.
They don't want a non-puppet in there.
Yeah, they don't want a non-puppet in the race. So true. From your take on this, you're looking at this, he seems serious about wanting to put an end to this conflict. Europe is freaking out. Zelensky is freaking out. The elites in DC, let's say Democrats, are freaking out. Do you think he's going to ultimately get what he wants out of this? That a president by himself has the capability of doing this?
Yeah, I'd say, sometimes we overestimate the power of the president in our system, but this is one area where absolutely the president can go to a country and now, whether he can deliver on all of his promises to that country, that's another question. But he can generally strike a deal to end a proxy war that has been recreated and furthered by the U.S. Yeah. And, Putin's stipulations are probably going to be some amount of land. It's probably, Ukraine can never join NATO, which they also have said, Hegseth and others have said they're dropping. It's probably that the CIA needs to get the hell out of Ukraine because even New York Times has admitted the CIA was training and arming Ukrainians as early as 2014, which does not sound like a non-war to me. And yeah, could he achieve this? I think he'll absolutely achieve this, ending this proxy war. But the reason it's going to be so easy for him to achieve is because the proxy war the entire time has been a U.S. creation. So
Right.
the U.S. can easily stop something that it created and funded and armed. If this were a war between Russia and some other country, had nothing to do with the U.S., it'd be a lot harder for the U.S. to go in and stop it because it wasn't about our interests. But since the U.S. created this thing, yeah, they can stop it.
From what is as you're looking out, your show is going to be tonight. What is the main topic that you see as, let's say, big that has not necessarily been talked about with this changeover in the administration?
Well, that's a good question. I'm spending the first 10 minutes of the show tonight. By the way, it'll premiere at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific on my YouTube, youtube.com/@realleecamp, and also on my rumble.com/leecamp. But yeah, I'm spending the first half of the show on, I call them the real owners of the world. And these are these giant shadow banks. People are starting to know some of their names, but BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street are some of the biggest ones. And BlackRock has over $10 trillion in its coffers. And where it invests that money is where the world, or at least the Western world, goes. So they invest in big oil, deforestation, all the media companies, all the big pharma companies, all the big ag companies, basically everything that is running and pivotal in our inverted totalitarian corporate-led world. They are the funding behind it and the investment behind it. And if they were to change their mind and go another way, let's say, for one thing, I give the example on the show of they are investing in big plastics. Dow Chemical makes a lot of plastics, and we're suffocating the world in plastics. And if they were to say, we're pulling all of our money, trillions of dollars out of plastics, and we're putting it into biodegradable plastics, well, that's where the industry would go. Or, they now have plastic substances that are made out of mushrooms and biodegrade quickly and that type of thing. That's where the industry would go. And it's the same with fossil fuels. It's the same with weapons contractors. They, in that way, control the world, control where the empire goes. And they're hardly ever talked about. Yeah. They get less media coverage than a Native American protesting the petrodollar. I mean, it's never mentioned. So it's amazing that we never mention kind of the most powerful entities in the Western world.
Well, I mean, those companies are only going to go in the direction of how do they maximize profit. They don't really care about anything else short of that. I mean, everything is subordinate to, all right, if we can make more money doing mushrooms and turning those into plastics, then that's what they do.
Yeah. Because
it's cheaper, I would imagine, to use whatever synthesis they're using to make the plastics. They're just going that direction. I don't know if there's an intellectual capacity to it beyond where's the profit and how can we make as much as possible.
I don't think there is. And the best example of that was a few years ago when there was a push, one of the many pushes to end fossil fuels. BlackRock made a statement about, we're going to pivot away from fossil fuels or something like that. And they are one of the biggest investors in oil, but also in this Texas oil company. And, so some of these oil companies and oil executives, oil investors started freaking out. Oh my God, BlackRock's moving their funds or whatever. And so the head of BlackRock then came out and made a statement and said, never mind, basically we said that, but we're not really doing that. They basically said we're going to pivot away from fossil fuels because it looked good to say that, but they never actually moved any of their money. It's just profit. They're going towards oil, and that's where the profit is. It's also, oil is pivotal to the U.S. control of the world, U.S. hegemony. And so, of course, they're keeping their money in oil.
That brings up the other issue of DOGE, right? Because it goes and falls into this kind of oligarchy thing that I would argue we were oligarchy before Trump took over. It seems like some people are now recognizing it. They're looking at you, Sanders, now that the Democratic Party is out of office.
Yeah.
They are going to fleece this government. The tax cuts are going to be astonishing. And those tax cuts will go through. Yeah, for the rich, and they'll go through. Give me your take on DOGE, because on its face, I don't think most Americans take issue with, let's say, an analysis of how money is being spent. The reality of it, though, is that this is not going to be to the betterment of the American public. It's not going to be to the betterment of the American worker. It's certainly not going to be to the benefit of the poor. They are talking about destroying various departments, like the Department of Education. I believe the Department of Energy is being touched. They are also, weirdly enough, interestingly enough, going into the Department of Defense. Thank you on that one. Give me your take on this, on DOGE, and how that's functioning in our system.
Well, I have a nuanced view that I think pisses off both sides, which is
go for it. Oh, those are the best. Those are the best.
Seems to be my my MO on a lot of things. Well, let's be clear on the aim of DOGE and Elon Musk and the others. It is to gut the things in government that are kind of barely still functioning to help the American worker and the American people. It doesn't, I think, at the end of the day, have almost anything to do with saving money. I mean, they don't actually care about whether money's saved, except that they can maybe go, it maybe looks like good PR to say, we'll give a big tax cut to the rich because we saved all this money from the government.
Right.
But they don't actually care about saving money.
By the way, that is what they're saying. They're saying that they're mitigating the cost of the tax cuts with savings through organizations like DOGE. That is their argument.
And then if you look at the list of the things they're crushing and gutting, some of the ones that the liberal media are, and I, there's a non-liberal media that actually gets more views, like Fox News, but the liberal media, some of the things that they're freaking out the most about, like USAID. I support crushing USAID because it's been used as a U.S. empire coup factory for generations. And, we found out just the other day that USAID funds something like 6,000 journalists around the world to put out pro-U.S. propaganda. So, I mean, you couldn't even begin to name the number of coups around the world that USAID has played some role in, either via grants or media or propaganda, et cetera, et cetera. So, I do not have a problem with that. And, that's one of the biggest things liberals pointed to, just to, oh my God, look at what they're doing. Another one that I was going to say, then some of the other ones that people are freaking out about, it's kind of like they weren't hardly doing anything to begin with. So they're crushing the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Now, why are they doing that? They're doing that because they don't care about average Americans. They don't want to protect you. Why would they ever care about that? But the reason it doesn't bug me that much is because the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau had been defanged. It had very little power. It was hardly doing anything for the American people. I think one of the biggest things they brag about is ending nitpicky fees from banks. But It's like, so basically you ended nitpicky fees so the banks can just continue exploiting us full tilt. But yeah, it's not, you don't have to pay the $5 fee. Like to me, it's a Band-Aid. A lot of what they're gutting were these little Band-Aids that are designed to actually make Americans not realize what's going on. Oh, the banks aren't exploiting you. We got rid of that $5 fee. Of course they're still exploiting us. So there's those things. Now, there are other things they are gutting or aiming to gut that could be very influential, such as the Department of Education and the FAA as these planes are falling out of the sky. And so there are other areas that are a big deal. And again, this is Trump and Musk and other ruling elite. Just they're trying to take off the final little bit. I mean, there's not much to take off, but these final little bit of safeguards to stop full-on corporatocracy, totalitarianism. And these safeguards were barely even there. They're just ripping off the Band-Aids on gaping wounds. And, I think it could harm a lot of people depending on where they keep angling it all. But I'm not crying for the few thousand CIA workers that took Trump's offer to, to leave the CIA. Like, oh no.
Even that part is fascinating to me, because usually intelligence is a sacred pony of both the right and the left. It is not a sacred pony to Trump.
Well,
Like,
no,
he
he just wants his CIA.
Yeah,
He's not-
right. Yes.
He's not getting rid of intelligence agents. He just wants his people.
Yes. I think that's the true part, right? It's like all of these people who came after me, they're fair game. Whether they were in the FBI, whether in the CIA, I want them gone. Fair game. Lefties, real lefties, looking at it and says, yes, good. They have zero issue with him doing that. But then they move into the Department of Education, the Department of Energy, the FAA, like you said, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And so it's kind of like a mixed bag. They are preserving nobody, which again gives you the mixed bag stuff. I'm fascinated by it. And again, for the American public who's not entirely paying attention, and they just hear there's all of this waste, fraud, and abuse that we are now getting rid of. And the American public says, great. What they don't get, as you pointed out, is that it's also going after things like Medicaid.
Yeah. Social Security. Yeah.
Social Security. Well, we don't know about Social Security yet. I mean,
well, they had a hearing where they were basically starting to go after Social Security, and I played a clip the other day where one of the Democratic senators was correctly saying, you know how much Elon Musk gets from the government per day? $8 million. And you're going after the $65 the grandma gets. Like,
and that's the point that Sanders made. Because when Sanders was on, I believe it was CNN, and then she was like, well, they said that $8 million or whatever that number was going out in fraud. And Sanders was looking at her like, are you seriously talking to me about $8 million? Do you know how much Social Security is? Or do you know how much Medicaid is? We're talking about, like, let's say an $800 billion thing. And you're talking to me about like $8 million. This is nonsense. They're trying to privatize Social Security. He's right. They, like, everything that they're doing, like, Republicans hate government services. And so things like Social Security, Medicare, I don't know why anybody would trust those services with the organization and a group that hates those services and want to privatize those benefits from our government. As you say, there are very few benefits that we get. They're trying to get rid of it. Is that the way you take that? I mean, that's the way I look at it. Anyway.
Yeah, no, it is. And you know, a lot of these things came into creation. They were birthed during the New Deal, during FDR.
Yes.
FDR was pressed and able to do these things because of a strong labor movement that basically made corporate America, which still even owned the presidency back then, made corporate America scared enough that the workers might really rise up, that they were willing to give some allowances like Social Security and Medicare and various other things, worker protections and stuff, in order to basically save capitalism. At that time, they were afraid capitalism would lose to communism around the world. And you had a lot of people in America, a lot of workers going, why am I, defending this system when over there the workers run things?
Right.
And so you had this kind of, back then you had this huge entity that was made all the capitalists, the true capital power brokers, afraid that they had to give these caveats and these allowances to workers. Now that we've, crushed the Soviet Union and everything else, these corporate entities are not really afraid of that. And they're just trying to destroy workers as much as they can. In Utah, they just passed and signed a bill making unions essentially illegal, at least with federal contracts. So we're seeing that a lot of other, outside of Trump, a lot of other, state entities, et cetera, are feeling empowered to crush the remnants of, the labor movement. There's only 7 to 10% of American workers are in unions anymore, and they want to crush that. That's too much for them.
Do you see a renewal? I don't see it. Hakeem Jeffries, I've titled the video Hakeem Jeffries is trash. I'll stand by that. I don't see a recognition, a come to Jesus. I don't see any of that. Do you see a renewal to that process? Meaning a backlash
by the Democrats?
Yeah. Do you see or because I think you're right. It was the fact that the labor movement was strong, that the labor movement had influence in regards to the Democratic Party. That doesn't seem to be the case today. I had a friend of mine who was part of a union And I remember I pointed out, I was like, but the Democrats don't seem to back you. And he says, well, yeah, but Republicans hate us. And so we're in this position where we can't say anything about Democrats because the opposition hates us. And so we're in this kind of box where we can never grow. We're always just kind of this kind of attrited away. That was his take on it. And so it was like, okay, unions can't even point out that the party that's supposed to represent them don't. That sucks. That's a horrible position to be in. And yet that seems to be the position that they were in. That's the position that he articulated. Do you think that there's going to be this kind of backlash? Right now, in the election that just recently took place, Trump won union voters. He won, at the very least, Teamsters. I mean, they wouldn't even give their, what did they call it? They don't even give their support to Kamala Harris in that, because the majority of them went with Trump. If you look at the election results, it was the same thing. In the polling, the majority of workers went with the Republicans. Elites went with Democrats. The poor went with Democrats. Do you think that a backlash is going to take place that reinvigorates that? Because if not, oh God.
Yeah, but I think the only backlash that could really matter is a backlash that drives outside of the two parties that are sending us off the same cliff.
Yeah.
So if the backlash, like, I'm happy to see protests in the streets today and yesterday and the day before. But if those protests are just get rid of Trump, then people still don't understand the system at play. Most of what, and I failed to mention this earlier, most of what Trump is able to do right now is at least partially thanks to previous Democratic presidents that have taken power, that have made the unitary executive more and more powerful. And at no point, you know, sometimes they would get really upset about these things, right? When George W. Bush was in office, Democrats said, oh, my God, he's taking all this power for himself. He's acting like he's a dictator, all this stuff. And then when Obama gets into office, nothing changes. They don't give any power back. Like
right.
When the Democrats got into office after Bush, they didn't say, oh, now we're ending unlimited surveillance of American citizens. No, every power they take is kept. And so the Democrats open this door for everything Trump is doing. And I think the pushback, the only pushback that'll ultimately matter long term is pushback that says, oh, both these corporate parties don't care about us. They care about profit. They care about corporate totalitarianism. And we have to get outside of this. And we need to fight for things that are not just electoralism. We need to fight for changes much larger than once every 4 years, pushing a button on a screen that may not actually record your vote. It's just, not, honestly, like it's gotten to the point when you have Congress and the president not listening to Americans at all. What we actually want gets done 0% of the time. You combine that with the fact that we can't actually see inside the computer voting systems and don't actually know what's going on. You might as well sit home on your couch and just push a button in the air, because it's equally influential. So the protests need to be about changing the systems. The systems need to change. We need to get outside of the capitalist destruction of the world, and it can't be done with these two garbage parties.
No, man, I agree with you. I guess my thing is I don't see a change. I don't see around the corner. I don't see that movement taking place.
I mean, part of it has to do with people are misled. So many people do not. I mean, you have people chanting in the street for USAID because they don't understand what it is. So many people are propagandized that they're completely confused, which is it's a psyop. It's by design. So I think you combine that with the fact that most people are just struggling to get by. They don't have time to educate themselves on this stuff, and they don't have time to get out on the streets. They don't have time to do anything other than work their two jobs and try and take care of their kids. So those two things work together perfectly to allow a capitalist exploitation of all of us.
Lee, man, always appreciate you joining me. Always appreciate talking to you. It's been a while since I've had the opportunity to talk to you, so I'm glad that you're doing well. I'm glad that your show is coming back tonight, Redacted tonight. Check him out at 7 p.m. on his YouTube channel, The Real Lee Camp. By the way, it is possible that with the normalization of relationships between, well, I guess this one doesn't matter, both of us on some level lost our jobs. Well, I did anyway, because of the sanctions that the Biden administration passed. Do you think with the normalization of relations that RT and Sputnik are coming back to the U.S.?
I would say highly unlikely because
Really?
because I mean, look, if you're hoping for that, I don't want to throw cold water on it.
No. I got to be honest with you. My take on it is interesting. I hate the fact that all of these people lost their jobs. From my take, I just want the war to stop. Even if I don't get anything out of it, I want it to stop. By the same token, I hate this idea that all of these people lost their jobs for nothing. I mean, like, if you get a situation where, okay, October 15th was the last day the Sputnik operated. And then 3-4 months later, you get a situation where, okay, now we've normalized relations with Russia. And it's like, okay, what the hell? So these people lost their jobs for no reason.
Well, let me just give a slightly different view, because I guess it was a little different for Sputnik and for RT America. Sputnik continued until, like you said, just a few months ago, really.
Yeah.
Whereas RT America fully shut down 3 years ago. But even before that, and I'm sure Sputnik saw some changes, but before that, 2016 was really the big change, where RT America's videos were suppressed into almost oblivion. I'm not privy to any of the talks, but I know that RT America was forced to meet with the Justice Department. That's when they essentially sold. It basically became a separate company from RT, and it was called TNR, and that was kind of forced, or at least pressured, by the Justice Department to be this separate entity. And it really was like, this was all under Trump. The Justice Department made it so that they could pull the plug on RT America at any moment they wanted to. And then they ultimately did that under Biden, but all the pieces were put in place under Trump. I mean, RT America went from a very widely watched TV channel to, very hard to find in the corners of the internet. And that was all under Trump. So I don't know. I could be wrong, but
we'll see. We'll see how it works. Fingers crossed. I want those people to get their jobs back. I don't know about RT.
There's so many amazing, that's the saddest part. There's so many amazing creators and speakers that were on those channels, Chris Hedges and Jesse Ventura and Abby Martin and so many of these awesome people in your show, and
Manila Chan.
Manila Chan. And I wish all those people were seen by millions of people, because they need to be. But I'd say that's the saddest part. Just before I run off, I just want to give people a way to find the show tonight. Probably the easiest thing to do is just go to my link tree, because that's easy not to forget. Linktree.com/Lee Camp. That's got all my links there of everything you need to find, YouTube, Rumble, everything. But it'll premiere at 7 p.m. It'll be a weekly show. It's very much in the same vein as Redacted Tonight, except it's called Unredacted Tonight. And it is, it's independent, not connected to RT.
Of course.
People will notice it is smaller budget, but I hope they very much see that it is essentially the same ideas, the same comedy, and the same host. So,
and just be clear, completely independent. My channel, your channel, all these channels, completely independent. Just curious on your take, because you were there during the storm when all this stuff was happening. Man, thank you for this, Lee. You have a good one, man. Be safe.
Thank you. You too, man.
All right, Lee Camp. Shout out to him. Let's go to chat just for a bit before we close. Lucky Lou. Let's see. Ron Hazelton loved RT. It was good. It was a good channel. You used to get content that you wouldn't necessarily get coming out of U.S. media. And again, we have been more accurate on this stuff. So what is this? Spiker Hand. John Clayton was not a Democrat. What is that? Not a Smokey, and the fire is coming. We'll see. I don't see a change. I don't see any political coalition that is challenging Trump. Trump seems to be strode the globe as a Galactus at this point. But we'll see. They're going to fleece America, though. Let's be very clear. Sid Precious. Watch the UK, see how you guys will end up in 5 years. Okay, we'll see. I guess we can do it. True story, Linda, our politicians and our media excel at divide and conquer, distraction, fear, and loathing, and ripping the US off blind. Yes. 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 1000% agree. Craig Waffle. Thanks, Lee. Shout out to Lee. Method. Get rid of artists, writers, musicians, etc. FF, for fuck's sake. Fair enough. My favorite planet, Jamal and Lee. Shout out to Lee. Shout out to him indeed. All right. We have come to the end. I want to thank all of you for joining me. I want to thank all of my guests, Lee, Garland, Andre. Shout out to all of you. Much appreciated. Give the show a like if you indeed are digging what is being put down. Share the content. You can always support this content through PayPal, Patreon, Super Chats, memberships. All Super Chats will be read, providing they're not racist, sexist, or bigoted. And all members, thank you. You make this content what it is. I deeply appreciate you for doing so. Most of these shows are demonetized. So at least most of them happen. It sometimes depends on the title, depends on how YouTube looks at it after. But you ultimately pay for this content. You support this content, and I thank you for it. I'm going to sign off. You all have a fantastic day, and I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. Jamal Thomas Morning Show. Signing off. Have a good one all.